This book is dedicated to John Frenning. I'll believe it when I see it. John Kerwin. Who I could bounce my ideas off of. Sandy Smart. Who encouraged me to publish. Sylvia Bertot. Whose support and love made this possible. In memory of Luke Diebold, Helen Bertot, Rother, Tomo, Donnell. The Call. July 2, 1964, San Francisco. It was a warm July morning as Shannon Murphy spread out the blanket on the beach running alongside San Francisco Bay. The soft, gray sand stretched north to the Golden Gate Bridge and to the south for several miles. Being a weekday, there were few people on the beach. Only the soft sounds of birds in the sky and the water hitting the beach filled the air. Shannon had just put her 2.5-year-old daughter, Jamie, down so that she could spread out the blanket and set up her lounge chair. Unbeknownst to her, Jamie had wandered off and was now next to the bay water. As Shannon laid the blanket down, she looked up. Not seeing Jamie, Eric sat quietly in the car. As panic started to set in, she screamed, "Jamie, where are you?" She scanned the beach and then looked toward the water, and though he kept it in, Jamie, alongside the crest of the water some 85 feet away. No. Shannon screamed and began to run toward Jamie as she saw her fall forward into the water. A second after Jamie fell in, a stranger, who happened to be jogging by, grabbed the little one and carried her toward Shannon. It all happened so fast that her mind had not caught up with her beating heart until he placed Jamie in her arms. The stranger neighbor continued on his way. Jamie was crying, but was all right. Shannon looked after the stranger, wanting to say something. But it was too late, he was gone. Shannon thought, how strange, that smile on his face. No warmth, and disquieting in a way. Warmth or no warmth, God bless him. The 6-foot, lean jogger Sir George Santiago. His 5-mile run took him from the west side of San Francisco Bay, under the Golden Gate Bridge, to Lincoln Boulevard where he parked his car. He then drove back to his house on Oceanside Drive in Daly City, where he had a spectacular view of the Pacific Ocean. Here, he was known to his neighbors and in the San Francisco area as Jack Ferrari, a successful real estate broker. However, to everyone else he was known as Nick Costello. Upon entering the 2-story house, one could see a clear view of the ocean through 2 windows that spanned almost the entire back wall. The room was furnished with a comfortable-looking sofa and a leather recliner, and against the wall was her as he left her stud fireplace. To the right was an open kitchen with a polished marble island, and to the left was the master bedroom. Behind the kitchen was a stairway leading up to other beds, and real estate operation, which was used as an office. The entire house was kept in a very neat and orderly manner. Some might call it the ideal bachelor pad. However, the stranger had never had a visitor, and it was the solitude and openness he enjoyed the most. After showering, Nick made his daily scheduled call. Asked as she met everyone 6 different numbers in the United States. The first one was a Chicago number, the second was local, and the last was in New York City. There was no response from the first 2 numbers. However, the New York City number had been disconnected. This served as a message for him to call Beach Tact in New York City for a job. Within 15 minutes Jack was out the door on his way to Cupertino. Selective in the he checked into the Cypress Hotel under the name of Nick Costello from Chicago. When he got to the front door of his room, he looked around to ensure no one was watching, put on some gloves, and entered the room. He walked over to the phone and made his phone call, which lasted only 2.5 minutes, and then left without touching or disturbing anything else in the room. 10 minutes later, he was on his way back to Daly City where he packed his bags and made a cursory check of the entire house, ensuring he left nothing to chance just in case he never returned. As was his custom, he called his lawyer and accountant, David Spencer, to advise him he would be leaving town for a couple of weeks quietly, most of him to take care of things while he was away. Before leaving for the airport, Jack went into his bedroom closet and closed the door behind him. Switching on the light, he moved the clothes hanging on the right to the left, exposing a safe. Opening the safe, he exerts the $65,000 sum. Next, he reached into his back pocket and took out his wallet, removing his driver's license, social security card, and 2 credit cards. Then, Mally did not and picked up a shoe lying on the floor of the closet and extracted a key hidden in its heel. All of it from the safe, he revealed a lock in the back panel of the safe. Using the key, he opened it and exposed 6 small stacks. Each stack contained a driver's license, a social security card, 2 credit cards, and a couple of passports. He placed the items he removed from his wallet on the 3rd stack, and extracted an identical number of items from the 4th stack. The stranger had entered the closet as Jack Ferrari and exited it as Tim Goldman, an Assassin's attorney and accountant. David Spencer had known Jack Ferrari for over 4 years. Jack hired David to take care of his finances and to be his advisor on legal matters. Unknown to David, Jack had an extensive background check on him for almost 2 months. Before approaching him, Jack simply asked him to be both his attorney and accountant, feeling that the attorney-client confidentiality automatically extended to his accounting practices with him. Though not necessarily true, Jack felt it would be an issue that would be clearly challenged in the courts, should the need arise. Not to mention the fact that he was not Jack Ferrari, another issue for deliberation. A simple ploy to cause confusion in order to buy time, with the hope that an opportunity Tyler's in the event of his capture. Though David felt his client wasn't being truthful to him about his real name, it was not for him to question. The money proved to be very good, and he had no indication that Jack was into anything illegal. At least that is how he felt until one day last year when they met to have a couple of drinks at a local bar. They were sitting at a table when a couple of rough-looking drunks walked into the bar and started giving everyone a hard time. Jack decided he didn't want any more to drink, and so they finished up and started for the door. As David passed one of the drunks, he accidentally bumped into him. The drunk turned and swung at David but missed him and, instead, almost hit Jack. Jack managed to step aside and let the man trip over his own feet, causing him to end up face down on the floor. He made her feel, pushed David along toward the door. The second man, seeing what had happened, grabbed a bottle and swung it at Jack. Jack ducked and hit him with an uppercut that sent the man reeling upward, landing him on his back. The first drunk was on his feet again and charged at Jack. Jack turned and, using the weight of the charge, redirected the man toward a nearby wall. You could hear the thump outside as the drunk's head put a dent in the hardwood. Jack bent down next to the other fallen drunk, looked him in the eye, and said something that until this day chilled David to the bone. Something about cutting his fingers off one by one and stuffing them. He tore up the paper. It wasn't what he said, but rather, how he said it. Without skipping a New Jersey, Jack got up and continued to push. He came up with a plan. Within a few seconds they were outside, leaving a cheering crowd of onlookers behind them. He was on the corner of New Britain. Fast on your feet, David remarked. Got to be, if you want to sell real estate in this country, he responded. David stared at his client in the back from, laughing. What the hell kind of real estate do you sell, anyway? Never mind it, none of my business, David said, deciding it would be best he didn't know. Then he went on home. Good night. Escaped. If the third night, Jack said. This did the Giordano family. June 23, 1964, New York. Approximately a week earlier, Felicia Giordano advised her father, Fazio Giordano, that if they wanted to survive this war they were in, they would have to take out Balnaldo, the head of the Castellino family. The Giordanos had been at war with the Castellino family for more than 3 months over control of the various racketeering enterprises they shared. Are you out of your mind, Feli? He barked at her. Pop, Feli is right. We got to hit them hard. They outnumber us 3-1. We need to show them we mean business, added Fabio, along with Fazio and his daughter, Felicia, were his son Fabio, and his top lieutenants, Leo Russo, John DeLuca, and Aaron Romano. The Giordano family was into prostitution, drugs, extortion, and liquor. Fabio handled the organization's political contacts by either bribery or extortion of city officials. They originally started in Queens and, over a short period, expanded into Brooklyn, Staten Island, and Long Island. Though much smaller than the Castellino family, they operated a lot more efficiently and had ties to one of the biggest crime families out of San Francisco. Unlike the Castellino family, they could bring in estrangeros, outsiders, to deal with uncomfortable situations. Much like Felicia was suggesting. After some thought, Fazio realized that they were right. It was time to send the Castellino family a strong message. Turning to Felicia, he ordered that she bring in an outsider to deal with the situation. Felicia nodded and left for Long Island. Felicia, a 27-year-old, very attractive redhead, stood 5'6", and would give a model a run for her money. She was a Harvard graduate who majored in criminology. Her ability to defuse a situation when warranted, and to act without any conscience, made her dangerous. Her reputation was quickly established among the family when she had the son of a politician kidnapped and then returned unharmed. She had no remorse, was calculating, and quite good as an advisor to her father. She was responsible for placing 2 of her most loyal soldiers in the Castellino family, a risky feat that took almost a year to fulfill. Rumor was that she would take the reins when her father stepped aside. Felicia had never met Nick Costello, but his reputation for completing his assignments was what legends were made of. Some called him a ghost or phantom. Some said he could take out a man in a crowded room without anyone realizing what had happened, until it was too late. Others said he had been a commando or Green Beret in Vietnam. In any case, she had heard he had never failed in any of his assignments, and that was what she needed. An outsider who could not be traced back to them. The instructions for contacting Nick were quite simple. Have The NYC number provided to them disconnected, and he would call their vacation home in the Hamptons within 24 hours. If they did not receive a call within that time period, it would mean that Nick was currently unavailable. Felicia, using her contacts in the Castellino family, needed to know the whereabouts of Balnaldo over the next few days. Information she would provide to Nick. A few days later, she made the call and waited. When Nick called, he advised her to look in the book titled Mississippi River, located in the library in the Hampton home. There she would find instructions on where to leave the information. Felicia was taken aback. When did he put the instructions in the book? How cunning. Who is this man? The instructions left were detailed in that they covered everything from making sure she wore gloves when handling any of the papers, to using copiers that were in public places, which did not contain any cameras, rather than in private. In anticipation that the information might fall into the wrong hands, Nick requested that the data consist of only Balnaldo's name, written backward, leaving out the first letter of each name, the locations he frequented, and nothing more specific. Instructions noted that no time or dates were to be provided. Cancellation of the orders would require the disconnection of the second NYC number within 10 days of the initial contact and would cost them 25% of the original cost of $100,000. Payment would be made upon completion of the job, and instructions of where to make the payment would be forthcoming. Any failure to meet their obligation would be deemed as disrespectful, resulting in them, and possibly any associates, becoming his next mark. The instructions went on to direct her to make 6 copies of the information she was providing and to leave them in 6 different locations, including one in the Hampton home. After 10 days, she was to return to these locations and remove any remaining copies and destroy them. With no reservation, Felicia put into motion the steps that would eliminate Balnaldo Castellino as she had been instructed. 2. She put on gloves and took a piece of paper, and using her left hand instead of her right, wrote Mr. Odlin Lo Analezzo on it. She also wrote the first 3 letters of 3 restaurants on Mulberry Street in New York City. She then placed the paper in an envelope and repeated this process 5 times. Then, calling in one of her trusted soldiers, she gave him 2 of the locations he was to drop off the envelope at. Half an hour later, she called another soldier to drop off the other 2. Lastly, she placed the final envelope in the book from which she extracted the instructions. Felicia was now concerned about herself and her father's welfare. This man could come in at any time and take them out. Was he for the highest bidder, or would he be loyal to her and her family? These thoughts began to run through her head. After thinking things through, she started to make plans of her own to eliminate Nick as a future threat. The Castellino family. June 22, 1964, New York. Balnaldo pointed his finger at his son, Tony, face red with anger. You can, let outsiders come in and simply walk all over us, he sputtered, referring to an incident where some soldiers of the Giordano family showed up at one of their bars and started a fight. Tony was caught in the middle of it and suffered a black eye. The intruders walked away, laughing out loud and mocking some of the members of the Castellino family. Dad, they aren't just trying to provoke us. They haven't tried to cross over to any of our locations. I am only saying that we need to be vigilant. That we need to send them a message by hitting some of the locations closer to them. In their own backyard, Tony finished. No, no, interjected Clemente Marino, one of Balnaldo's advisors. I say we call in some guns from Chicago before they do. Hey, Junior, what do you think? Asked the senior Balnaldo to his son. Junior, the youngest of Balnaldo's sons, who stood about 5'7" and weighed about 175 pounds, was known for being fair-minded and logical. I think we should go after their top lieutenants and stop wasting time hitting their joints. Hit Leo Russo, Aaron Romano, or Fabio Giordano. That is what we should do. Hey, Tony, what about Fazio's daughter, Felicia? Everybody knows old man Fazio and T got nothing upstairs, and he done T shit without checking with her. She's the one we should go after, Junior added. You, rewrite. Felicia is the real issue, Tony responded. Let's go after her, Malco Lombardi interjected. You guys gone nuts? You go after her and you might as well sign your own death certificates. Unless we take out her old man and Fabio first, we don't have a chance in hell of getting away with it. In fact, the entire top tier of their organization would have to be eliminated before we can breathe easier, remarked Balnaldo. Like the Giordano family, the Costolino family was into prostitution, drugs, and the numbers rackets. They operated solely in Manhattan and the Bronx and were looking to expand into Giordano territory. They numbered over 200, but were not as efficiently managed as the Giordano family. They sat there quietly for a good 5 minutes, contemplating what they were planning. What about their ties to the San Francisco family? Asked Clemente. Don, think they would be a problem as long as we do a thorough job, responded Tony. After a few minutes, Balnaldo slammed his open hand on the desk, getting everyone's attention. This needs to be done. I want Tony and Clemente to come up with a plan on how to wipe out the whole fucking family. Just like in one of those old-time movies when you take out the bad guys while they repissing in the John Malco, you and Junior find out exactly where in Long Island they live, get the plans to their home. Lastly, this cannot go out of this room. No one needs to know what we are planning. Understood? Balnaldo asked, staring at each one of them. They all nodded. They all understood. Then he added, Tony, call Chicago and tell them we need some muscle, about 5 good men. The arrival. July 6, 1964, Pennsylvania. 4 days later Nick, now going by the name of Tim Goldman, arrived at Lehigh International Airport, and rented a car for a one-way trip to Newark, New Jersey, where he would drop it off. Tim always traveled light, carrying only a duffel bag with enough clothes for a few days and a camera strapped around his neck. He wore a light, black jacket over a dark blue shirt, dungarees, and sneakers. Before dropping the car off, he phoned ahead to an old military acquaintance about purchasing some merchandise for his business. Parking the car out of sight of the store on Pacific Street and VC, he entered. Hello, Jay, he greeted the man behind the counter of the gun store. It's been a long time, Theo, Jay Messina replied. They both embraced each other. Jay knew Nick by his real name and by no other. I got the product you requested in the back. Hold on while I put the closed sign on the door, Jay said. Nick purposely Arrived at 5 p.m. so that it wouldn't be suspicious if the store was closed. Nick was very meticulous about his planning. Jay took him in the back where, behind a makeshift wall, he had his inventory of weapons. There were all types of rifles and guns. A .38 super automatic with a silencer attached caught Nick, S.I. Don, see that too often, Jay said. It holds 9 rounds. And it's known to be quite accurate. Depends on who's firing, responded Nick. Jay laughed and said, guess it does. I'll take this one with me, he told Jay. With 9 in the chamber and 15 rounds in a box, it's something I can easily put in my jacket pocket. Continuing to browse the merchandise, Nick grabbed a Browning .22 semi-automatic rifle to examine. I like this one, but I need a scope and a silencer for it, he told Jay. A silencer? Asked Jay. Okay, but I cannot guarantee its accuracy once I attach a silencer to it, you understand, he told Nick. No problem, Jay. How soon do you think you can have it done? Nick asked. Should have it in a few days, he replied. With that, they shook hands and once more embraced each other. Placing the gun inside a shoulder holster, which Jay provided, Nick left the store, only after looking out through the side of the shade covering the front door window. After getting into the car, Nick drove to the rental site located near the Newark airport and turned it in. From there, he took a taxi to the Newark train station, boarded a train to New York, then got off at Times Square. Finally, he walked over to the Long Island Railroad station and boarded a train to the Hamptons. Help from a stranger. July 6 to 7, 1964, Long Island, New York, 11:30 p.m. 4 hours later, Nick Costello was checking into the old Hampton Inn in East Hampton as Tim Goldman. That night he exited the inn, stole a car a mile down the road, and drove to the home of Fazio Giordano. Nick had decided earlier that he didn't want to chance picking up the information Felicia was providing at any train or bus station where there were too many watchful eyes. No, the best choice would be to go to the Hampton home and pick it up there. He should be in and out without anyone being the wiser, or so he thought. Parking about a quarter of a mile from their estate, he crept along the 6-foot wall that surrounded the estate, until he reached a tree that overhung into their property. This is how he got in the last few times he visited the estate. Nick was familiar with the grounds and where all of the sentries would be located. As he moved toward the house, he noticed that there were no guards posted around the garden as was the custom. Something was wrong. Nick felt it in his gut. Moving more cautiously, he scanned the area. Finally, he spotted one of the guards lying face down on the ground, a knife sticking out of his back. Nick moved swiftly toward the back of the house while drawing his .38. As he came around to the back of the house, he spotted a couple of men prying open the back door and slipping in. Moving quietly, he picked up a rock and threw it through the back upstairs window, shattering it. The noise woke up its occupant. One of the men who had entered through the back door exited and was moving in Nick's direction. The intruder spotted Nick. At the same time, Nick stood up and fired. The intruder fired back, nicking Nick in the shoulder. Nick's shot had more success as the intruder hit the ground with a bullet through his chest. Nick moved quickly and fired another shot into his head as he moved past him, continuing into the house. On the balcony above, Fabio was screaming for the guards. "Joey, Sammy, where are you?" he shouted. Felicia had grabbed the gun by her bedside and was heading downstairs when she heard a sound coming from the living room area, to the right side of the stairs. Raising the pistol, she leaned against the wall and waited. The second intruder crept slowly in the darkness. He moved toward the light at the bottom of the steps and then stopped. She heard a gunshot. It came from outside, from where they had come in. Felicia heard another gunshot outside and moved down the stairs more quickly. As she approached the bottom of the stairs, she stopped, facing the wall. Pressing up against it, she reached for the light switch on the other side of the wall with her left hand. Suddenly, and before she could turn on the lights, she heard a muzzled sound and felt a sting to her left shoulder. Then she heard another muzzled sound and a thump. Falling back onto the steps, she sat there with her gun aiming at the entryway. Nick had spotted the second intruder and fired. Nick moved swiftly into the library on his left and extracted what he came for and was out the door within 15 seconds. As he exited the house, he spotted another man dressed in black clothes running from the house. Nick took aim and fired, hitting him in the upper right thigh, causing the man to scream in pain. Within 30 seconds, Nick was on his way back to the Hampton Inn. Before returning the car to the exact spot from where he had stolen it, Nick wiped it clean and restored the wiring under the steering wheel to its original state. He returned to the inn and slipped back in unnoticed, then treated the injury on his shoulder. A couple of band-aids and rubbing alcohol, and he was good to go. Nick realized that he had made a real error when he was at the mansion. He should have stayed hidden until he was 100% sure that he would not be seen. It was a stupid move. Should have kept my eye on them. I was stupid. The next day, dressed in a black trench coat, white shirt, and dungarees, Nick took the LIRR back to New York City. The cleanup. July 7, 1964, Long Island, New York, 12:40 a.m. Fabio reached the bottom of the stairs where Felicia lay. Holding her left shoulder, she had been shot. He peered into the living room where he spotted someone lying on the floor. Aiming his gun at the body, Fabio approached with caution, turning on the light as he entered the room. The guy had been shot in the head, and what remained of his life lay in a pool of blood like a halo around what was left of his skull. Yeah, but this guy was no angel. Who the fuck is that, Fabio thought. Returning to his sister, he helped her up and moved her away toward the kitchen, still trying to figure out what the hell happened. Fabio wasn't sure if they were safe and was being very cautious. A minute ago, he heard a muffled scream coming from outside the house but had not heard anything more since. The house was dead quiet, like the bodies invading his home and landscape. Fabio knew who ordered the hit. But what the fuck? We should all be dead now. Reaching for the phone, Fabio called Leo Russo's home half a mile away. Leo, get over here fast. Some guys tried to take us out, and I think they are still here, he whispered into the phone. Leo immediately woke his sons, Jimmy and Encino, and a couple of associates, and raced toward Fazio's home. As they approached the front of the estate, they spotted a man limping away from the house. They pulled up behind him and jumped out of the car. The individual turned and raised a gun. Leo fired, hitting him in the shoulder. They all ran toward the assailant, reaching him at the same time, and grabbed him before he could use the gun. "Bring him," Leo ordered. Grabbing the gunman, they jumped back into the car and drove up the driveway, peering into the darkness for any other unwelcomed guests. The group got out and ran for the house, dragging their bloody friend with them. The perimeter of the house was secured while, with extreme caution, Leo entered with his guns, moving from room to room. "Fabio, Felicia, where are you?" Leo shouted. In the kitchen, they heard Fabio shout. "Where is Fazio?" asked Leo. "He stayed in Brooklyn last night," responded Fabio. "Jimmy, get a few guys out to Brooklyn. Call ahead and tell them what happened," Leo ordered. Encino, Leo's oldest son, remained outside to check the grounds and reported that both guards, Sammy and Joey, were dead. Additionally, there was another corpse out there whom he didn't know. "What? Who? Show me the fucking bastard." "He's probably lucky he is dead," Fabio said. They all went outside to examine the guy. "Looks like he was shot twice," Leo stated. "Encino, hurry and get all of these bodies out of here, just in case anyone heard the gunshots and called the police. Find the car they came in and dump them in it, then drive it to the Castellino's. Let the family find it and think about whether they should be kissing their asses good. Bye," Leo ordered. "I'll take care of it, boss," Encino replied. They all went back into the house to check on how Felicia was doing. They found her sitting in the library, sipping a glass of wine as one of the men tended to her shoulder. Fabio described the scene outside to her. "So who shot all these bastards?" asked Felicia. "I thought you did, little sister," said Fabio. "No, not me. I never got off a shot before getting hit," she replied. "Who then?" asked Leo. "Maybe Sammy or Joey got off a few shots before they got hit," interjected Fabio. "Don, think it was possible. They were found pretty far from the house," responded Leo. "Why Don, we ask our friend here," Leo suggested, pointing to the thug they brought in from outside. It turned out his name was Joseph Ricci, and he was in from Chicago. Felicia stood up and looked down at Joseph Ricci, who was lying on the floor. Felicia could tell he was nervous, probably an amateur at this. "Now, you listen up. I can tell you are Italian, and I Don, believe in shooting our own people. So here is what we are going to do. We are going to tell everyone that you ran from the scene like a coward. Let's see how they greet you in Chicago," Felicia told him. "Of course, if you give us all the information we want, we'll let you go and you fend for yourself. Anyone asks, we simply say we killed all three of you." "So how about it?" Felicia asked him. "How do I know you Aaron, lying to me?" he asked her. "You Don, Felicia responded. "But we haven't, got anything to lose. Think about it," she responded. Joe knew a no-brainer when he heard one. He would be dead within a week if they found out he ran. Okay. I'll tell you everything. But you got to get me out of the state," he said. "If the Castellinos caught him, death would be the least of his problems." Felicia, looking him straight in the eye, said, "No, you get the fuck out of the state on your own. We'll provide you with a car, and where you go, I really don't care. But you do as we ask. And then you disappear. You understand?" Sure, sure, I understand, responded Joe. Leo, go and see if you can catch up with Encino. Tell him to bring that car to the front of the house, Felicia said. Yes, Ms. Giordano, he responded. Joe could see that she had a lot of power and that she must really be the head of the family. Felicia had him call Balnaldo Castellino, pretending to be one of the other hit men, and told him that the job had been done, and that not only was both Felicia and Fabio dead, but they also got John DeLuca. Pick him up, she ordered. They picked up Ricci and carried him toward the car now sitting in front of the house. He turned to Felicia and said, "Thank you." Felicia raised a gun, which Leo had handed her, put a bullet in Joseph Ricci's head and responded, "You, re-welcome." Encino, on second thought, forget about dumping the car. Where they can find it? We want it dumped in some secluded spot. Like Jersey. We don't want anyone finding the car for a long time, and nobody in Jersey gives a fuck if there's nothing in it. For them, Leo told him. Encino drove away with all three bodies stuffed in the trunk of the car, followed by one of Leo's sons in another car. Going back into the house, they discussed what had happened and what their next move should be. They sat there quietly thinking about what had occurred when the phone rang. Leo picked it up. "Hello, who is this?" he said. Into the phone. "What? When?" I'll be right there." Leo shouted. Hanging up the phone, he looked to Felicia and then to Fabio. "Your father has been shot. He's dead," he said. As tears welled up in his eyes, as they slowly filled with hatred and revenge. Fabio was already moving with thoughts of Castellino blood paving the streets of Manhattan. Felicia stood transfixed, eyes hardening into a deadly stare. Death would be a prayer that would be answered slowly and sweetly. A New Neighbor. July 7, 1964, New York. From a distance, Chapel of Love played from an open window of one of the 6-story tenement buildings that lined both sides of the street. It was a hot summer afternoon in Upper Manhattan. And it was the bottom of the 9th inning. 11-year-old Charlie McNally was up. Charlie was their best hitter, so Tyler moved back, going deep. Charlie let the first pitch go by. "What's a matter, Charlie? You afraid of the ball?" shouted Jimmy Johnson from the third base fire hydrant. The Mustang parked on the right-hand side of the street was first base and the hubcap in the center was second. The Yankee Streeters were losing 4-3 to the sidewalk Mets with 2 outs. And Rick Thompson on second. This was the pitch, as 10-year-old Davey Costanzo let the ball go. Charlie took a full swing but only nicked the bottom of the ball, causing it to pop up high. Tyler looked up and saw it heading his way. Everyone began to shout to Tyler to move back. This was it. He was going to be the hero. Easy catch, easy out, thought Tyler as he moved back slightly and extended his glove to meet the ball. The ball started to descend toward Tyler's glove. Tyler extended as far as he could to meet the oncoming ball when suddenly a hand stuck out in front of him and caught the ball just above Tyler's glove. "Hey! What the hell?" shouted Tyler. He turned to see a tall stranger wearing a black trench coat and dark glasses smiling down at him. "Sorry, son, but it was going to hit me," replied the stranger. "Interference," shouted Jimmy. "No way," answered Charlie. "He was going to catch it," remarked the stranger. "Do over," shouted most of the other kids. The stranger handed the ball to Tyler, stating that he would, ve caught the ball. Yeah, whatever, Tyler replied. I know I would, ve caught the ball. You should have stepped aside. And let me catch the ball, mister. Sorry, kid. Really, I am sorry, responded the stranger. Before the stranger moved on, he turned to Tyler and asked if he knew where 224 St. Nicholas was. Hey, that's my building, replied Tyler as he pointed down the street. Look for a fat man sitting on the steps with a gray shirt. The stranger moved on down the block toward his destination, smiling at the kids as he walked past them. Hey, guys, he would, ve caught the ball, honest, he interjected. Yeah right, replied Charlie. After some time, the boys decided to let it go and play. Another time, they moved down the block toward the building next to Tyler's, where they parked themselves on the stoop, listening to the Beatles sing, I Want to Hold Your Hand from a nearby opened window. The 11-year-olds were a true mix of New York City's melting pot. Jimmy Johnson and Rick Thompson were black, Tyler Santiago and Adam Ruiz were Hispanic, Davy Costanzo was Italian, and Charlie McNally was Irish. They all attended PS 125 and had been friends for more than 2 years. On the next stoop sat Fat Man, one of the tenants occupying an apartment in the building where Tyler and his mom lived. He was a 6-foot-tall Italian, weighing 220 plus pounds, who enjoyed sitting on the stoop, watching the folks go by while listening to songs by Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, and Tony Bennett on his portable radio. Across the street was the ever-present Uncle Ted sitting on his stoop at 223 St. Nicholas. Uncle Ted, who was also Italian, was about 5'9", weighing around 190 pounds. No matter how hot it was, you could count on Uncle Ted to be wearing a smart jacket over a collarless shirt with matching pants and shoes. The kids liked him, 'cause every once in a while he would treat them to ice cream. Although he was, for the most part, an introvert, he had a warm smile for everyone. After a short time, the stranger appeared with the super of Tyler's building. It seemed as if he rented the only apartment available, the one across from Tyler and his mom. The stranger walked down the steps and turned right, heading up the block and passing the kids. Hey, mister, you moving in? Asked Jimmy. Maybe, he replied. They looked after the tall stranger as he walked away. Hey. He's a cool-looking dude, remarked Davy. Bet you he knows karate and kung fu, Jimmy added. Yeah, he's probably an undercover cop and is looking for you for trying to steal second base, Charlie remarked to Rick. They all laughed out loud. For a couple of hours the kids hung around and discussed the important issues surrounding their lives, such as the newest DC or Marvel comic books, or if Superman could beat the Hulk. All were hot and wishing for the ice cream truck, and praying that Uncle Ted would again foot the bill. As if a prayer was answered, they heard the music coming down the block, and all of their eyes turned toward Uncle Ted, who was already rising and waving them toward the oncoming truck. After getting their ice cream and thanking Uncle Ted, the kids returned to their stoop, and waving, he returned to his. I wonder where he's from, Charlie asked. Don, no, replied Jimmy. One day he just appeared. What you talking about? Asked Tyler. He's always been there. He was here when my mom and I moved in. Well, he wasn't here before you came, 'cause I never seen him. Before that, Jimmy interjected. Yeah, Tyler. You brought the ice cream man with you, said Rick. Once more they all busted out laughing. After hanging around on the stoop for some time, the calls began. Charlie, come home this minute, a voice rang out from one of the windows. Next, it was Ricky's turn as his father walked past their stoop and nodded to his son that it was time to go home. This was an automatic indication for Adam, who lived in Rick's building, that Rick was the rule and it was time to go home. Davy, Tyler, and Jimmy hung out until Tyler's mother stuck her head out of the third-floor window and called him up. Jimmy and Davy turned up to look at Tyler's mom. Hi, Miss Sylvia. Both boys shouted up to her. Tyler's mom was nominated as the best-looking mom on the block. Charlie, face reddening, said, in all New York. She waved to them and said good night, and they responded with big smiles and waves. Both Jimmy and Davy lived in the building where they now sat, and were upstairs in their home in a matter of seconds. The Black Aces. July 7, 1964, New York. A few blocks away, a stretched silver limo turned up the block toward 126th Street on its weekly pickup run. In the back was Joe Coleto, a 6-foot, broad-shouldered lieutenant with the Costolino family who, over the last 6 years, had been entrusted with the responsibility of bringing in the loot made from drugs on the streets. Headed for his rendezvous with the Black Aces, a local street gang, he smiled about how things have developed over the last few years. Initially, there was little income for the family from this area of the city. However, after enlisting these gang members, business picked up. Their monthly income went from $3,000 to $25,000 in less than 2 years. The Black Aces, who first numbered 6, now numbered 18. Their territory covered 5 square miles of Upper Manhattan and was growing every day. Jose Torres, the Black Aces leader, grew up on the streets. By the age of 17, he quickly adapted and won the respect of his peers when he slashed and stabbed Luis Sanchez, the local 19-year-old gang leader who tried to take his bike away. When the ambulance arrived with the local police, as was the norm in this neighborhood, Jose stepped up and provided them with detailed information on how a gang from another street came into the neighborhood and attacked Sanchez. His demeanor and character convinced the police that he was telling the truth. Jose, who could charm a young girl's mother or serve at Mass on Sunday, could change his persona as easily as he changed his shoes. The world was his oyster. He could have it all. The gang members were impressed and adopted him into their ranks. Within 3 weeks, Jose became the leader of the Black Aces. His first act as their leader was to eliminate his predecessor. Luis Sanchez became a victim of a hit-and-run driver on the day he was released from the hospital. The driver was never found, but it turned out that the vehicle was traced back to a stolen unmarked police car out of the nearby police station. Politics and embarrassment kept the news out of the papers and was simply forgotten. Jose Torres, also known as Blackie, kept as low a profile as possible while his empire grew. His most trusted members, or brothers as he referred to them, were Nelson Diaz, Loco, and Kenny Roberts, Lefty, who were with him from the beginning and would do anything to please him. Loco got his name when a man named David Cassidy, a neighborhood resident, tried to organize the community in driving the gang out by taking pictures of their activities. A couple of nights later, Mr. Cassidy was found hanging from a lamppost. This, of course, infuriated the local police chief, Lt. John O. Malley, who ordered an immediate investigation. It took them almost 2 weeks to identify who Mr. Cassidy was, and by that time the local residents were scared into looking the other way whenever the Black Aces were around and doing their thing. Though a task force was created, it was dismantled within a month due to budget cuts and a lack of neighborhood cooperation and support. After the incident, the police began patrolling the neighborhood more frequently. But after a short while, with other neighborhoods requiring more of their time and no other incidents to speak of, the task force abandoned their more frequent vigilance and went back to the normal routine of an occasional run through the area. Blackie, though slightly upset with Loco for his part in eliminating the local resistance, was actually quite pleased with the results. The message got across to all, via word of mouth, that they weren't going to take any crap from anyone. Blackie was even more proud of him when Loco mentioned how this particular troublemaker had no family, and no one to make a fuss over him. This showed Blackie that Loco could be trusted to make the right decisions, as extreme as they may be, under the right conditions. Lefty, who was highly respected by both Loco and Blackie for his cunningness, always carried a knife. It was his idea of how to get rid of Luis Sanchez. Blackie thought the idea of using a stolen car out of the local police precinct was a stroke of genius. After eliminating Sanchez, dumping the car, and getting back to their neighborhood, they laughed about how it would take the police months to find out that the car used was out of their own pool of unmarked cars. A couple of years earlier, Joe Coleto approached Blackie with a proposition for making more money. He felt they could bring in more than what they were making by running numbers and extracting protection money from the local vendors. Joe provided them with direction on how to go about making the most out of their venture, throw parties, visit the local schools and parks, and give the stuff away. Please them and they shall come, was Joe's motto. He was right, they returned by the droves. Within several months, Blackie brought the entire process under control. With help and direction from Joe Coleto, he organized them into 4 different groups, consisting of approximately 4 members, each with its own leader. One group, led by Loco, was responsible for looking for new prospects and enlarging their business. The second group was led by Lefty and was responsible for maintaining control in the various locations they operated. The third group, led by Eiffel Bonilla, nicknamed Skinny, picked up and dropped off the drugs and money. The last group, led by Blackie himself, was made up of the administrators, or overseers. They were headquartered in what appeared to be an abandoned building owned by the Costalino family, on 118th Street and St. Nicholas. The building was entered through a neighboring alley and only from the back. It consisted of 6 floors with 4 apartments on each one. Of these, only 15 were in good condition and were all located in the back, hiding any activity that might be seen from the streets at night. An Assassin's Plan. July 7, 1964. Nick Costello took the A train down to Spring Street in Little Italy. Walking east, he turned south on Mulberry Street. After walking for approximately 3 blocks, he was in the vicinity of a couple of restaurants frequented by his mark. Looking around, he noticed the 6-story buildings on both sides of the street. Next, he surveyed a couple of the buildings to better determine if he had free access to enter them. To Nick's surprise, he did not. In both cases, he would need to ring one of the tenants to be admitted. This was not acceptable. Then, walking down the block, he noticed most of the buildings had alleyways that ran between them. Looking around, he ventured down an alleyway unnoticed. Behind the buildings, Nick found that most of them had back doors. Some were locked and some were open. Entering one of them, he found out he had free access to the roof, which automatically gave him access to any one of the buildings. Additionally, it gave him a clear view of most of the restaurants on Mulberry Street, while at the same time provided several escape routes. Satisfied in having found a perch from which his observation of the streets was wide open, he left the area. He would return, and with a little bit of luck, his mark would be clearly in his sights. Normally, Nick would not rush things, but the attempts on the Giordano family hastened his resolve to complete the mission. Can T get paid if the payee is dead? As he ventured from building to building making mental notes of alternative positions and efficient exits, he noticed the little pockets of crowds gathering on the street. He backed away from the edge of the building, thinking that maybe someone spotted him. He cautiously glanced over the edge again and noticed the crowds were growing, but were consumed by something else. What was stirring the masses, he wondered. Returning to the streets as discreetly as possible, Nick ventured close to some people having an open conversation. Listening intently, he heard a woman say, "Don Fazio era stato assassinato." Don Fazio had been assassinated. Nick didn't need to hear any more, and within seconds was on his way back to the train station. Once there, he made a quick call to Jay and asked him how it was going. "We'll be ready tonight," Jay was happy to report. "Good. I will be there first thing in the morning," came Nick's response. The dinner invite. July 7, 1964. Sylvia Santiago, Tyler's mom, was about 5'7", with a slim build, beautiful green eyes, and dark hair she always wore combed up. At 30, she made the heads turn as she walked down the street. Except for one time when she had to borrow money, she never complained about anything and was quite content with her life, having taught Tyler to also be appreciative of what they had. Tyler always wondered about his dad, but his mom never talked about him, and he never pressed the matter. All he knew was that they were married for a couple of years before he came along and that his dad left before his first birthday. As they were sitting to eat, they heard some commotion out in the hallway, causing Tyler to move quickly to the door only to be stopped by his mom. She pulled him back, walked forward and looked through the peephole. She saw that the new neighbor was carrying a couple of suitcases into his apartment. Sylvia opened the door and asked if everything was all right. The neighbor looked up, smiled, and replied, "Yes, thank you. We are about to sit down for dinner. Would you like to join us?" He looked back with a surprised look on his face. Looking down at Tyler, he responded, "Well, that depends on what you are having and if I'm going to get chewed out for interference." "Do you normally invite strangers into your home?" "No, not normally, but I would feel guilty knowing that you probably haven't eaten, moving in and all, while I am sitting here with too much for us to finish," she answered. Okay, give me a sec to clean up, he responded as he went into his apartment. Tyler could not believe his mom. Mom, what are you doing? Are you crazy? You don't even know him. You just mind your manners, young man, she said to him. He seems harmless enough. A few minutes later, the stranger was at their door. After some introductions, they all sat down to eat. Nick told them his name was Tim Goldman, and that he was here on a 6 to 8 week tour as an advisor for a corporation that was having some financial problems. Sylvia asked about his earlier comment regarding interference, and Tyler filled her in on his would-be famous catch. Nick again apologized, but added that Tyler would have dropped the ball anyway and that he had saved Tyler from the embarrassment. Tyler looked hard at Nick and then began to laugh. They all laughed when Nick added that it was the first ball he had ever caught and that normally he would be the one to drop the ball. After a short time and more pleasantries, the evening was drawing to a close. Nick volunteered to do the dishes, but was shunned by Sylvia. Please keep Tyler busy a while longer while I do the dishes, she asked. Nick smiled at her and obeyed as he continued to visit with Tyler. They talked about the Beatles, whom Nick did care for, and more baseball. Tyler decided he liked this man, and realized that he had never seen his mom laugh as much as she had today. Around 9 p.m. Tyler went to bed, while his mom and Nick remained at the dining table having some coffee and just chatting. Tyler was happy to see his mom enjoying Nick's visit. Yep, Tyler decided, he liked this man. The next morning, Tyler was up bright and early. It was 8:30. Sunday morning, July 8th, when Tyler finished his morning chores of making his bed and taking out the garbage. His mom was still in bed when he left for his favorite stoop to wait for the rest of the gang. Charlie, as usual, was the first to arrive. Tyler told him about the stranger and that they had dinner together. Gee, maybe your mom likes him, and they are going to get married, remarked Charlie. Oh man, you crazy. They just met, Tyler answered. Yeah, well I heard about marry at first sight, Haven, you asked Charlie. You dummy, that is love at first sight, responded Tyler. We'll see what happens today. They sat there for a short time, scanning the neighborhood. Uncle Ted was in his usual spot, and the fat man had just gotten to his step when Jimmy came down. What's happening, guys? Asked Jimmy. The stranger is going to marry Tyler's mom, Charlie shouted. Oh man, what you saying? Asked Jimmy. Tyler immediately responded with the fact that Charlie was going crazy and imagining stuff. Everyone knows Charlie and got any marbles, Tyler remarked. They all laughed. Tyler told the story to Jimmy, who seemed to take it all in without any notice. Hope it works out for you, Tyler. What's the stranger like? Jimmy asked. He seems okay, replied Tyler. What's he do? Charlie inquired. He shows people how to spend their money, Tyler responded. Wow, he must be rich, remarked Jimmy. Then why did he move in here? Asked Charlie. Because he doesn't want to spend all of his money, answered Tyler. Yeah, he's real smart, Jimmy added. A few minutes later, Nick descended from the apartment house, turned left and started up the block toward the avenue. As he passed the kids he smiled down at Tyler, and without saying a word, continued on. Tyler smiled back and nodded. Carrying a duffel bag and his camera, Nick hastened past the kids. They all looked after Nick as he continued up the block. "Hey, you notice the camera?" Jimmy noted. "He must be going sightseeing in New York," Charlie commented. "Why would he do that?" Jimmy asked. "'Cause that's what people do with cameras, dummy," replied Charlie. "Yeah," Tyler added. Taking the Underground A train, running north to south through most of Manhattan, Nick got off at Times Square and switched over to the PATH trains. The ride would take him from New York City to New Jersey via an underwater tunnel that ran under the Hudson River, where he would then get off in Newark. In his hands, he clutched the morning paper, reading intently as he learned about how Fazio Giordano had been killed. It seemed that sometime during the night a couple of men broke into his Brooklyn apartment and shot him and several of his bodyguards. The paper went on to say that one of the assailants was killed at the scene while another had escaped. It was believed that Fazio was the head of the Giordano crime family, and that the hit was ordered by someone in the Castellino family. An unknown source stated that the long feud between the two families had, as of that day, ended. Fazio was survived by a son, Fabio, and daughter, Felicia, both of whom could not be reached for comment. Mr. Giordano's wife had succumbed to cancer 2 years prior. Funeral services would be privately held at the family estate in Long Island. No other comments were made by members of the family. The good news. July 6, 1964, Castellino home. Around 2 a.m. they got the call they had been waiting for. "Marino, we got the broad and her brother. Also we got Luca," Joe said. "What about Leo Russo?" asked Clemente Marino. He was wounded. Saw blood coming from his neck. They got Joseph and Tommy, though. I just made it out of there in time, right before the rest of their people got there." Joseph added. "Mr. Marino, I got shot too. Where can I go?" he asked. "Okay, you go to our place on 12th Street, Clemente instructed him. Okay. Thanks," answered Joseph. Clemente walked into the study where Balnaldo and his sons, Tony and Junior, and Joe Coleto and Malco Lombardi had been waiting for the news. Balnaldo was beside himself. "What about Fazio?" he screamed. "We haven't heard anything," Clemente answered. Balnaldo sat there, thinking about what had happened, worrying about what had occurred. He knew Fazio would spare no expense to seek revenge for his son and daughter. It would be a while before the Giordanos could attack. With Romano and Leo temporarily out of the picture, Balnaldo had enough time to order another hit to finish the job. Then the phone rang again. Clemente picked up the receiver. Yes. Great job," he said into the phone. Clemente turned and gave Balnaldo a huge smile. He did not have to say anything. "They got him. They got the bastard," Balnaldo shouted at Clemente. "Yep. Got him in bed. He's deader than a doorknob," Clemente added. "Deader than a doorknob? What the fuck does that mean?" Balnaldo asked, laughing out loud. Clemente only shrugged his shoulders. He didn't know either. Balnaldo could not contain himself. He jumped up from his chair and gave Clemente a huge hug. They were all up on their feet congratulating each other. From this day forward, they are going to remember the Castellino family. People will think twice before they fuck with us, Balnaldo practically shouted it out. Tomorrow we go to Little Italy and celebrate, he commanded. Pop, maybe we should keep low just a little while longer. You know, till things cool down, Junior said. Balnaldo stared at his son for a few seconds, then at the faces of each one in the room. No, no, we got to show our strength. We got to show them we are in charge. In fact, I want you to send some flowers to the Giordano estate expressing our sympathy, with an invitation to meet when the opportunity permits. I want them to know I am not a hard man to deal with. That I am willing to put things behind us. Of course, laughing out loud, I won, expect an answer too quickly, Balnaldo said. La Celebration. July 8, 1964. Reaching Newark, Nick grabbed a cab to a location a few blocks from J.'s shop. Pretending to enter the warehouse where he had been dropped off, he waited until the cab was well out of sight before walking the 2 blocks to the shop. Nick watched from across the street, making sure Jay had no customers, before approaching. Jay looked up as Nick entered the shop, smiled but made no reaction to acknowledge him other than nodding at him to go to the back. Nick moved immediately to the back and waited for Jay. A minute later, Jay appeared, drawing the curtain behind him. Removing the makeshift wall, Jay showed him his masterpiece. Nick was quite pleased with Jay's handiwork. In addition to the rifle, a tripod to steady it, and 5 bullets, all that was needed, Nick had also requested 4 boxes of remote-controlled firecrackers. Each 2x4-inch box contained 5 firecrackers, which could be ignited remotely from as much as 3 blocks away. Reaching into his duffel bag, Nick handed Jay the money. During this entire process, no words were exchanged. Nothing was said. Both Nick and Jay embraced and nodded goodbye. As always, Nick exited cautiously, walking about half a mile before hailing a cab to the Newark train station. It was now about 10:45 a.m., and his Mark would be having his lunch, as usual, anywhere between 12:30 and 1 p.m. The streets were packed with people. After all, it was a beautiful Sunday with the temperature hovering around 75 degrees. Nick walked east from Spring Street and turned south on Mulberry. On the corner of Grand Street and Mulberry, he discreetly placed one of the small black boxes under a parked car. Continuing down Mulberry, he placed another box halfway down the block, and then another one on Hester Street, all the while looking around, making sure he wasn't being watched. Next, he headed north on Mulberry and placed the last box on the other side of the street. He then entered one of the buildings between Grand Street and Broome. Racing cautiously up the stairs, he positioned himself on the east side of the block facing up Mulberry. At 12:15 p.m., Nick began to take pictures up Mulberry Street. At 12:45 he saw a couple of limousines pulling up to the west side of Mulberry between Grand and Hester Streets. Using his camera, he zoomed in on the occupants exiting the limo. They entered the La Ristorante restaurant. Judging by the number of occupants, it would be a while before they exited. Looks like they have something to celebrate, thought Nick. Inside the restaurant, they were drinking and having a feast. Drinks were on the house. All tabs would be picked up by the Castellino family. Giordano family acts. July 8, 1964, 3 p.m. The 12th Street and Avenue di Castellino location, a corner grocery store, would normally have a couple of Joe Colato's boys Sitting outside of the place playing dominoes, but not today. Not when the threat from the Giordano family had been eliminated. Aaron Romano and about 8 of his men rushed inside the store, with guns out. Castellino's men were caught completely by surprise. No one had to be shot. Bursting into the back room, Aaron and his men found 2 rows of tables used in the manufacturing of drugs, and more than 100 paper bags containing $50,000. There were about 6 men and 5 women, and though they were heavily armed, the surprise attack caught them off guard. Not one of them was able to draw a weapon in time. Aaron had Rinaldo Blanchi, the guy in charge, call Clemente Marino to tell him they were bandaging up some guy for them. Before the call, Aaron warned Rinaldo that he'd better make it look good, or the gun that was being held to his 25-year-old son's head would accidentally go off. This was to eliminate any suspicion that the Giordano family had actually caught and eliminated the guy sent to kill them, the same one who had called in earlier to report the success of the hit. After the call, Aaron turned to the rest of the people in the room and made them write their names and addresses before giving them each close to $6,000. Before letting them go, however, he told them that if he found out they talked to either the police or the Castellino family, Aaron and his men would be coming for them. Next, Aaron turned his attention to Rinaldo and his son, and shot them both in the head in front of all of these people, emphasizing their need to stay silent. La Ristorante. July 8, 1964. Mangiare, eat, enjoy, Balnaldo was shouting to everyone. Around 3:20 p.m. Clemente advised Balnaldo that 12th Street called about a guy showing up with a bullet in his leg, and that they were taking care of it. Good, good. They should have given him a trophy or something for killing the bitch. Felicia and her brother laughed. Balnaldo. At 6:25 p.m., Balnaldo signaled his son and Clemente that he was ready to go. Clemente, Jr., and Tony exited the restaurant to alert the limo drivers. Balnaldo's limo was across the street, but before Clemente could order the driver to bring it around, Jr. told him not to worry. Who the hell are you afraid of? He asked Clemente. They all fucking dead. Clemente nodded, but felt uneasy about it. Turning to the rest of the men, he ordered them to be vigilant and to stay close to Mr. Balnaldo as he exited. Balnaldo waved and shouted at the people in the restaurant as he exited. To his left was Clemente, and to his right was Malco. In front of him walked Junior, and Tony followed behind. Before exiting between the parked cars, they heard what sounded like gunshots. They all ducked. What the fuck? Balnaldo screamed. Then again, they heard more shots, only this time it was a little closer. They, reshooting fucking firecrackers, shouted one of the limo drivers. They all got up cautiously. Then they started to laugh. Especially when they noticed that bystanders were looking at them strangely. Balnaldo laughed the loudest. They continued their trek across the street when there was another burst of firecrackers behind them. Balnaldo turned to look up Mulberry Street, still laughing. Clemente caught the splatter of blood on his cheek as it burst out the back of Balnaldo's head. Patience was a virtue, thought a lone figure now racing across the top of several buildings, as the screams of the people below faded in the background. Within minutes, Nick was on his way back to his apartment. In harm's way. July 8, 1964, 3:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, the boys were playing stickball, when several gang members of the Black Aces came down their block. "Hey, you guys, you want some cool stuff?" asked one of the gang members. "No," replied Tyler as they grouped behind Charlie. "Get off our block with your stuff," remarked Rick. "We know what that is," added Tyler. Drugs," Jimmy interjected. Charlie raised the stick they were using as the bat, ready to swing it. "What's a matter, sissies, you afraid of us or something?" asked Loco. "Yeah, you come closer and see if my stick is afraid of you," Charlie dared. Before the gang members got any closer, Uncle Ted was between them. "Get out of here, you punks," he shouted. There were about 6 of them, and they stood their ground, laughing, giving him the finger and calling him names. Then the fat man was in their face with a baseball bat and told them to get the fuck off the block, or he was going to bash their heads in. "I know where you bastards hang out, and I'll go over there with some of my friends, and I'll kick your asses from here to hell. So get the fuck out before I lose it." The gang of boys stared at the fat man and then backed up, without saying a word. When they were a safe distance away, one of the bigger gang members remarked that the fat man had better watch what he was saying. The fat man responded in kind with, "Go home to your father and mother, for I go over there and kick their asses. Stay off this street. You hear, you asses." The gang moved on, looking back every once in a while to see if the fat man was following, saying something about how he shouldn't have messed with the Black Aces. A minute later, Uncle Ted, the fat man, and the boys were laughing hysterically. A few minutes after that, everything was back to normal. The kids were playing their stickball, Uncle Ted was on his stoop, and the fat man was on his. Everything was back to normal, for the last time. After dinner, Tyler went back downstairs. It was a cloudless day, and there was a cool breeze as the sun began to set. Most of the boys were there, sitting on the stoop, chatting, and simply enjoying the night air. Again they saw Mr. Tim Goldman leave with his camera and an attaché case. He nodded at the boys and ruffled Tyler's hair a bit as he passed. "Wonder where he's off to," Charlie commented. "Probably going to take more pictures and do some work saving people money," Tyler responded. After a while, Tyler's mom came downstairs and joined them on the stoop. It was a beautiful, peaceful night. As usual, the ice cream truck came around 6 p.m. This time, it was the fat man who offered to buy the ice cream. The kids were beginning to think there was a competition between the two men about who the kids liked most. As they sat on the stoop enjoying their ice cream, they heard a screeching of tires from the other end of the block. Everyone stood up so that they could have a better look. A car was racing down the street toward them. The fat man immediately got off the stoop and walked toward the center of the street. As the car approached, he could see what appeared to be guns sticking out of the windows. "Get down," he screamed as the car raced toward them. Someone from inside the car fired at the fat man, hitting him in the chest. Lefty, who was driving, saw Uncle Ted coming down the block and floored the car in his direction. As the car hit Uncle Ted, it veered to the other side, hitting 2 or 3 parked cars. In the meantime, everyone had ducked for cover. Within a few seconds, it was all over. Tyler lay on the ground, his mother lay on the sidewalk near him. Slowly they began to get up and look around The fat man's wound proved fatal. Uncle Ted sustained a broken collarbone and leg. The kids looked around. Tyler looked toward where his mom still lay. "Mom, it's okay, gone," he shouted to her. "Mom, get up." In a second, he was by her side. Turning her over, he could see that she had been shot. "Mom," screamed Tyler. "Mom, get up. Please, please, Mom, get up." She had been shot in the chest. Sylvia looked up at Tyler and smiled. "It will be all right, baby. Don't cry. It will be all right," and she took her last breath. Tyler held her head on his lap. He cried, "No. No. No. No." A Family's Sorrow. July 8, 1964, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Tyler could not hear the sirens in the background, nor feel the cool breeze in the air. Tears continued to pour from Tyler as they took his mother away in the ambulance. Sitting in the back of a police car, Tyler, through blurry eyes, could see Nick Costello across the street, staring at him with cold, hard eyes. It would be a sight that Tyler would remember years later. Nick arrived shortly after the police got there and heard Uncle Ted telling the story of what had happened earlier in the day, and that he thought it was the kids who belonged to a gang on the next street, who called themselves the Black Aces. Nick's smile was gone, his fists were clenched as he visualized what had happened, pledging to young Tyler that this deed would not go unpunished. Nick waited until the police had left and for most of the people to return to their homes before walking slowly across the street to his apartment. When he got there, he filled his duffel bag with his belongings and disappeared into the night. Tyler sat alone in an interrogation room at the local precinct. Though a couple of officers came in to check on him, asking him if he needed anything, Tyler never responded. He sat still, looking at the table in front of him, replaying what had happened to his mother, over and over again. Hoping it was a dream that could not be true, a nightmare, but knowing that it was not, Tyler prayed for a miracle. He knew that because of him, she was dead. Because he wasn't fast enough, because he was playing with his friends and not watching over his mother, she was dead. His heart exploded in his chest. Grief, turning to rage, finally consumed him with hopelessness. He deserved to lose her. He should have protected her. He should, done something, but he didn't. The warmth had gone out of his life. Someone entered the room. Tyler did not look up, not even when the officer sat down next to him. "Hello, Tyler. It's been a couple of years since we seen each other. Do you remember?" Tyler looked up at the officer now, and suddenly realized it was his Uncle George from Queens. The tears welled up, and Tyler grabbed for him. They hugged for a long time, with Tyler letting it all out, sobbing louder as he told his uncle how his mother died. "It's okay, Tyler. There was nothing you could do. We are going to get those sons of bitches. I promise you. We are going to get them for what they did to my little sister. I personally will blow their fucking heads off. I promise. I swear on her grave that they will not get away with this," George said with anger in his voice. "You are going to come home with me and live with us in Queens. Is that okay with you?" Tyler simply stared, and then nodded, realizing then that he couldn't T go home again. That mom would T be there to cook him his favorite dinner, or play Scrabble with him, or help him with his homework. Tears streamed down his cheek as he thought about all these things. Uncle George. July 8, 1964. George Santiago had been a police officer for 15 years. He was streetwise and was quite capable of carrying his own. Other officers respected and loved him as he had proven himself. Time and time again. He didn't take any crap from anyone, and those on his beat respected him. He never abused or used those people. He was honor-bound to serve and protect. Accompanying him to the precinct were two fellow officers, Judy Goldstein and Jerry Matthews. They too were veterans of New York's finest. Congregating in the precinct's conference room, the officers, all anxious to help a fellow officer, brought George up to date on what they knew. They all expressed their sympathy and promised to bring these punks to justice. As they waited for the paperwork, they collaborated on what each knew about the Black Aces. They had already had encounters with the gang, but fear on the streets provided silence and anonymity. They knew the gang hung between 110th and 123rd Streets and that they were involved with drugs. Several hours had passed as the officers prepared for the sting that would round up all of the members. Their only witness had been rushed to a nearby hospital and placed under protective custody. We're heading out to the scene where we believe the gang has a hangout, and we want you to tag along, stated one of the local officers to George. George looked up at them, his heart pounding with a strong desire to rush out with them. But he knew this was no good. That he couldn't lead the charge with the hate that consumed him. No, I have to take care of my nephew. He needs me now. George responded. Would you allow my partners to go in my place? George asked. Sure, of course, the senior officers replied. Let us go then. Let us go and clean up the garbage. Over 22 officers exited the precinct to 9 awaiting cars. The sirens could be heard a mile down the road as they approached St. Nicholas from both ends. 3 cars parked at 110th and St. Nicholas while the other cars came in at 127th Street and St. Nicholas. They silenced the sirens and began combing the neighborhood as they made their way toward 118th Street where it was believed the gang's headquarters were. Though it was 5 a.m., the sirens brought a few people onto the streets, hesitantly providing them with information as to where the gang hung out. The cars silently pulled up on both sides of the street just outside of the apartment building. Quietly moving down the alleyway, the police made their way into the entryway. All had their guns drawn. Most of them wishing that just one of the gangbangers opened fire so that they would have an excuse to take them out, once and for all. But that didn't happen. As they went from apartment to apartment, they found nothing. No one was there. They found drugs, an arsenal of guns hidden in the walls, but no gang members could be located. The search continued well into the next night and into the next morning without so much as a hint as to where they might have gone. Not wanting to return to the precinct, the small army of cops continued their search, expanding it over 2 miles into the surrounding area. Nothing, they had nothing to show for the long hours. This was not just a punk gang. They were organized with options, alternatives, and plans. They picked up and moved to another location with business as usual. We underestimated how well organized this young gang is, said Judy Goldstein. Finally, after 27 hours, they called it quits and started back to the precinct. Tyler and his uncle George had already left for Queens by the time Judy and the officers returned to the precinct. Several officers slumped into their chairs exhausted and feeling defeated. "It doesn't make any sense," commented Judy. "Where the hell did they go?" "Well, it doesn't matter now because sooner or later they going to turn up, and we'll be waiting for them," said one of the detectives. It was 6 a.m. when George called to get a status report. Judy spoke to him for over an hour as he drilled her for more details on their search for the Black Aces. When it was over, George walked over to his kitchen and poured himself a cup of coffee while he pondered all of what Judy told him. They must have gotten word that the cops were looking for them and have split. But where could they have gone? They, a local gang, with no place to go. Where would they go? Where? They must have help from family, or they, just connected. They may think they, untouchable, but they just fucked with the wrong man. They changed my nephew's life forever. George thought back to Judy's last words, "One more thing. The witness, who was taken to the hospital, is now a homicide." George sat in silence as he listened to the details in disbelief. He knew the police did what they could. He also knew that they were taken away from another case involving a mob killing downtown. Someone rubbed out Balnaldo Castellino, head of the Castellino family. They were simply stretched too thin. Someday he'd find the truth. Just not today, George thought. The Takeout. July 9, 1964, 1 to 5 a.m. Earlier Uncle Ted had been rushed to Mt. Sinai Hospital where his wounds were attended to. The doctors placed a cast on his left leg and stabilized his collarbone by encasing him in an upper body cast. Officers had accompanied the ambulance and waited outside the operating room and then accompanied the patient to his recovery room. They stationed themselves outside of the door. Their orders were simple: guard this witness until we get a positive identification. Around 1 a.m. another officer arrived to relieve them. They filled him in on what was going on and advised him that they would be back in 8 hours to resume their post. "No problem. Make sure you bring me some coffee," said the cop. 5 minutes later, the officer stepped into Uncle Ted's recovery room and put a bullet in his head. Half an hour later, the same officer walked to a nearby police station, stole a police van, and headed uptown toward St. Nicholas. By 2 a.m., he was at the hideout of the Black Aces. He picked the lock on the door and let himself in. Several members were awake as he approached. "Listen up. My name is Malco Lombardi," he shouted. "I am here to warn you that the cops are on their way. You left a fucking witness. I work for the Castellino family, and they ordered me to get you out." "What the hell?" Jose, one of the gang members, shouted. "Who the fuck are you?" asked Blackie, the gang leader. "Like I said, I am just a messenger," replied Malco. "If you want to settle it on your own, then goodbye," Malco continued. Hold on. Why should we trust you?" Blackie inquired. "You, a fucking cop," Jose remarked. "I am not a cop, just dressed like one, so that I could steal one of their vans," the cop impersonator responded. "Hey, it doesn't T matter to me. I am just following orders, doing my job. I don't, T need this, and I sure don't, T want to be here when the cops arrive. You killed a cop, S sister, and you, going down. What you talking about, man, what cop broad, asked Blackie. Hey, I don't, T have time to explain, so either you come with me or settle it on your own. The family gave me 5,000 for myself and 25,000 for you, the stranger continued. Whoa, where, s the dough, asked Blackie. In the van, where else did you think it would be? Blackie was always quick in understanding a situation and realized this was bad. Killing a cop or a relative of a cop was bad, real bad. Okay, we go now, he ordered. They rushed out of their hangout and onto the street. The stranger got into the driver's seat while the leader jumped into the passenger side. Hey, man, this is a fucking paddy wagon, Blackie remarked. It's the best I could muster in such a short time, Malco responded. The rest of the gang piled into the back, complaining that it was packed and crowded. It's a short trip, Malco shouted back to them. Next to Blackie was a bag and in it was the 25,000. Hey, guys, we got the money up here, Blackie shouted back to his gang. There was a cheer from the back of the van. Where you taking us, man? Asked Blackie. To a hideout in New Jersey, where you can lay low for a couple of days, and then it's up to you where you go, replied the stranger. Within minutes, they were on their way out of Manhattan, heading toward New Jersey. They crossed over the George Washington Bridge and turned right toward Englewood Cliffs. After a mile, they headed toward the Englewood Cliff Park. They continued down to the picnic area of the park running alongside the Hudson River. They could see the George Washington Bridge in the near distance, looming above them. Man, this is a cool place, Blackie remarked. Malco pulled the van a few feet from the end of the pier, overlooking the river. He whipped out a silenced pistol and fired into Blackie's head. He pulled an automatic from under the seat and grabbed the bag of money, leaving a few loose bills on Blackie's lap. Stepping out of the van, he placed a brick on the gas pedal and put the van in drive. He moved to the rear of the van as it slowly moved forward and he began emptying the automatic into the back of the van. He could hear shouts and screams as the van hit the water. He stood there for almost a minute as the van sank into the Hudson River. After he watched the van sink out of sight, he followed the 1,000 steps up toward the top of the cliffs and disappeared into the dead of night. A survivor. July 9, 1964, 5:30 a.m. Lefty tried to peer out the side-wired window of the van as they reached the bottom of Englewood Cliffs. It was dark when they stopped for a brief moment. Then the van started moving forward again. All of a sudden, bullets began to riddle the back of the van. Luis Sanchez caught one in the chest, Nelson was hit in the leg, and Russell caught one in the stomach. Everyone dropped to the floor. There were screams as bullets were flying around them. Suddenly they felt the van tilt forward, and they piled toward the front of the van. The van plunged into the cold Hudson River. Water began to seep into the van as it slowly descended into the river. Screams could be heard from inside the van. What the fuck, someone screamed. You fucking bastard, someone else screamed. You motherfucker, screamed Loco as he took a shot to his neck. The water continued to seep into the van as it descended into The Hudson River. Lefty, realizing the situation, quickly crawled toward the back of the van. Feeling his way in the dark, he moved as quickly as he could. Among the screams, the blood, and the water rushing in, he made his way to the back door. Lefty pushed as hard as he could while he watched the surface quickly disappearing as the water engulfed the van. As the water filled in from the back, Kenny once more pushed as hard as he could, managing to open the back door enough to slip through. It appeared as if one of the bullets hit the lock and damaged it, allowing Kenny to get it open. As the water rushing past him helped push the door open, Kenny swam out. He glanced behind him and saw the van's door shut, sealing the fate of his comrades. Kenny then swam forward and upward, thinking back to when he was on the swimming team in high school, what seemed to be a lifetime ago. Holding his breath and swimming, he felt as if his lungs were going to burst. He stayed below as long as he could until finally he could not hold it any longer. When he surfaced, there was no one to be seen. Also floating to the top were some bills adding up to a few $100s. Enough for Lefty to get out of town. Goodbye, Balnaldo Castellino. July 11, 1964. It was a rainy, hot Saturday morning as the long line of limousines took Don Balnaldo to his final resting place. Tony Castellino, his brother Balnaldo Jr., Clemente Marino, and Malco Lombardi eulogized Balnaldo Castellino Sr. at the church. Everyone praised them for their eloquent words. After the funeral services, they all gathered at La Ristorante for breakfast. There were about 250 guests, most were members of the Castellino family. "I will destroy what is left of the Giordano family," Tony said, revenge coursing through his veins. "Easy, my brother, we will deal with them shortly," responded Junior. "I heard they had a private funeral for their family at the estate. Also heard that it was Aaron Romano who hit 12th Street, Clemente said. "Aaron called me," said Tony Castellino. "They re-scared shitless and want to show their sincerity by offering some of their locations, merging our enterprises. What do you think, Clemente?" "You got to be kidding," Clemente replied. "Well, I decided to meet with them and, when the time is right, take them to an open field in New Jersey and bury them alive," responded Tony. "They are going to learn what it's like to mess with us." "Just like the Don said," added Malco. Clemente raised his glass of wine and said, to Don Balnaldo Castellino, "May his death be avenged. Salute." The bitter taste of revenge. July 11, 1964, 7 a.m. Felicia Giordano, her brother, Fabio, Leo Russo, Jonda Luca, and Aaron Romano sat at the Hampton estate having an early breakfast. Although Fazio was gone, the family was still intact. In spite of what Tony Castellino thought, the funeral parlor had 3 caskets delivered, one contained Fazio Giordano, and the other 2 were empty. The news media outside the estate took pictures and speculated as to the contents of each casket. Their spirits were high with another great news story in the making. Blood was an expendable commodity within the families on the streets of New York. Felicia knew that in order to win this war once and for all, she, her brother, John DeLuca, and Leo Russo had to remain out of sight. When she got the news that Balnaldo had been taken out, she knew they now had a shot at taking them all out. Especially since they thought the Giordano family had been eliminated. Felicia ordered Aaron to call the Balnaldo family and to ask For a truce. The hit on their father was already in the works, and could not have been stopped. An eye for an eye, thought Aaron. They were sorry for their loss, and enough blood had been shed. Aaron referred to Tony Costalino as the Don, which pleased Tony significantly. No one would challenge the new Don. But Tony did not know his intoxication with power would end with the ultimate hangover. "We would like to make amends," said Aaron, "and maybe have a meet with Tony Costalino, the Don of the family. We are prepared to turn over Giordano's financial interest in exchange for our lives." Upon Balnaldo Costalino's death, Felicia ordered that the information dropped off for Nick had been picked up. She wasn't too surprised when she found that the one in the library was not there. She had already deduced that it was Nick Costello who had dealt with the visitors that night. Additionally, she realized Nick had saved her and Fabiano's lives. Lastly, she decided to pay Nick not only what he was contracted to do, but would provide an additional $100,000 for a job well done. It was unfortunate that he didn't act sooner. It could have saved her father. But she was her father's daughter, and this fortuitous incident, however sad, had propelled her into the most enviable of positions. Whether anyone else realized this twist of fate, she was now the Don of the Giordano family. She also realized that Nick had proven to be invaluable. Felicia and the rest of her guests retired to the living room and turned on the television to watch the news channel. They chatted about their future, and about how things were going to be once she took over all of the Costalino family's enterprises. Felicia watched in anticipation, wondering if her orders had been carried out by her two spies in the Costalino family. Approximately 2 hours later, her curiosity and anticipation were satisfied when a special news bulletin came over the airways and confirmed it. It appeared as if more than 100 people had to be rushed to nearby hospitals because of food poisoning. An hour later, there was an update to the news broadcast. The special report now was saying that most of the people rushed to the hospital had died. Doctors were initially unable to determine the cause of their death. However, given the circumstances that only adults were affected, it was believed that the wine may have been poisoned. Felicia stood up, smiling, and raised her glass. "Salute. Salute," they all responded. 20 years later. May 22, 1984, New York. Felicia Giordano announced her decision to step down as the head of the Giordano family and turn over the reins to her brother Fabio. Fabio and Felicia together had successfully managed the family, resulting in the creation of one of the biggest crime syndicates in the United States. Their solo act of 1964 not only eliminated the Costalino family as a threat, but in this single act, the heads of 6 Chicago crime families also faced extinction. Within a week of what is now known as the last breakfast at La Ristorante, Felicia mobilized her family and took on the most prosperous locations of the Costalino family. With the support and muscle from the Russo and Costa families of San Francisco, they also attacked and severely crippled most of the Chicago families. Almost every day the newspapers were either reporting a mob hit or a funeral. Around mid-September of that year, 2 agents from the FBI were sent to visit Felicia Giordano. It was made clear to her that they had made it a priority to bring her and her whole organization down. Everyone had assumed the FBI and most government agencies had been too consumed with the ongoing Investigation of the assassination of President Kennedy, which occurred in November of the previous year. Felicia felt a lot of dirt could be swept under the rug without the FBI's intervention at this time. However, though, Felicia and Fabio knew that the FBI could not pin anything on the Giordano family. They decided to call for a truce with any remaining families. "Why push our luck?" Fabio stated, with which Felicia agreed. While skeptical and mistrustful of the Giordano enterprise, the truce was accepted by all. As a result, the businesses owned by the Castellino family were turned over to the Giordano family. The San Francisco families divided up the businesses in Chicago, while the Giordano family took complete control of the businesses in New York. The family sold their East Hampton estate and moved to Bristol, New Jersey, approximately 75 miles from New York, where they purchased 50 acres of prime real estate. The new home was built with state-of-the-art surveillance equipment, as well as a 24-hour armed security force whose numbers could only be estimated at 50 or better. Felicia knew they had made a lot of enemies, and it would take some time before they could root them out and slash or turn them. During that period, she had tried to incorporate the help of Nick Costello. It wasn't until the third try that she finally got a response. Nick explained to Felicia that he had been away on assignment and could not be reached. He also told her that he would be unable to accept any assignments for a few years because of previous commitments. "Years," shouted Felicia into the phone. "Yes, I will contact you when I am once more available." "Good. Bye," Nick calmly responded and hung up. Felicia was beside herself. She was used to calling the shots, not being treated as if she didn't matter, or told what to do or to be. She gave the orders and people jumped. "How dare he brush me away like that," she thought. Could he have been hurt, or worse, identified? What if he was identified? No one would dare to come forward. Not if they thought he was working for us. Who the hell is Nick Costello, anyway? Felicia decided to mount her own investigation as to the real identity of Nick Costello. An investigation that took 5 years. Only to find that there were a few thousand Nick Costellos in the United States, not to mention more than a few thousand out of Sicily and Italy. None of the hundreds she pushed to investigate proved viable. Nick Costello remained a mystery, a ghost or phantom who came and went as he saw fit. Though Felicia felt more secure in her mansion, the thought that Nick Costello was still out there haunted her for months. Afterward, she knew his style and technique were beyond her ability and manpower to overcome. He was fluid and swift. He worked alone, thus enabling him the ease with which to move undetected and undeterred. The ball was and always would be in his court, and she did not like the rules of his game. She wanted to own, to harness, to control what was beyond her reach. She knew too well that she needed, but could never trust, Nick Costello, the bastard. After conferring with her brother on how she felt, Fabio was able to convince Felicia that even though they now lived in a more secure environment unknown to the assassin, if Nick Costello wanted to come after her, for any reason, there really wasn't much they could do about it. However, Nick had saved both of their lives, so why would he come after them? This put Felicia at ease somewhat, but not totally. Nick would find them if he so wished. The last 20 years had taken their toll on Felicia. She made many enemies on that fateful day back in '64. As a result, There had been several attempts on her and her brother's lives. But now things had calmed down, with little threat from any of the newly created families. It was time to walk away. So she thought. The Task Force. May 8, 1984, New York City. At 37 years of age, John Connolly was only 5'4", weighed 155 pounds, with thick blonde hair and the honest, good looks that attracted women like flies. Behind his back his colleagues called him Babyface Connolly. This was not to say that he lacked respect. On the contrary, everyone had the highest regard for him, acknowledging his long sought-after and well-deserved success in his chosen field. Graduate of both the Police Academy and Harvard Law, Connolly was one of the youngest agents to achieve agent in charge in FBI history. Over a year ago, he took command of the Organized Crime Task Force, OCTF, which had consisted of 15 agents. Today it had over 25 agents and was situated in mid-Manhattan, with satellite offices in Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Long Island. The OCTF's database included the names of all of the precinct captains for New York, all of which had been instructed to report any crimes that may have direct ties to any of the crime families. One of Connolly's first assignments was to identify all of the crime families in the United States. He also created a special unit, consisting of 5 agents, to see if there were any links to any crime syndicates in other countries. Lastly, he realized that to be successful in bringing these dedicated criminals to what he liked to call the Last Supper justice, he would have to identify any influences the crime families had over law enforcement agencies. Not an easy task. In 1 year, OCTF put together a 250-page investigative report that listed every suspected member of every crime family in the United States. The report went on to list other countries that were suspected of being involved with the shipment of drugs, arms, and the trafficking of young girls and boys for prostitution. One of the most powerful families listed was the Giordano family, run by Felicia and Fabio Giordano. Rumor was that they masterminded the infamous Last Breakfast at La Ristorante, where close to 100 people lost their lives after consuming some wine, which had been artfully tainted, resulting in a well-planned clean sweep. It was also rumored they currently controlled most of the prostitution, numbers, and drug traffic in the state of New York, and that they had strong ties to crime families in most U.S. cities, including Chicago and San Francisco. During that same time period, OTCF enlisted the aid of several police officers, directly from the academy, to infiltrate the organization. This was met with heavy criticism when 2 officers were found dead with gunshots to the head, only 2 weeks after being accepted into the Giordano family. 2 of John's top agents, Sam Williams and Sheila Cooper, were assigned to investigate the murders. Sam Williams was a veteran agent of 10 years, standing at 5'8", 185 pounds, and one of the first black agents to join the FBI. Sheila, on the other hand, was 5'6", weighed only 145 pounds soaking wet, and had only 1 year in the agency. Both, however, proved their loyalty and dedication to following the code they swore to uphold, time and time again. John Connolly had a gift for recognizing the qualities in people, and he saw these 2 as very good in dealing with a situation, especially when restraint and understanding the letter of the law was called for. Prompted by the death of the slain undercover officers, the 2 agents visited Felicia at her mansion in New Jersey, and Then later at her favorite restaurant. At one point during the investigation, Felicia asked the two agents if the officers had been tortured before they were killed. No, not that we know of. Why? Asked Sheila. It would be shameful if whoever took their lives in such a sadistic manner would torture them as well. After all, they were only doing their sworn duty, Felicia responded. Sheila and Sam stared at Felicia with contempt. Sheila, placing both of her hands on the table, went right up to Felicia's face, and staring into her eyes said, "It's just a matter of time before we take you down." Felicia, smiling, stared back and replied, "That will never happen, and I suggest you keep your distance before I get a restraining order against you and your partner." The tension in the room could be felt as Felicia's bodyguards moved toward the two agents, only being stopped when Felicia waved them off. "You better leave now. My friends are getting nervous," she told the agents. Looking up at her friends, Sheila said, "If I were you boys, I would be distancing myself from her. It's just a matter of time," she said. "We'll be back, Ms. Giordano. Your luck is running out," replied Sheila, looking down at Felicia. An unexpected break. May 11 to 13, 1984, New York City. When both Sam Williams and Sheila Cooper returned to their headquarters, John Connolly invited them into his office. Closing the door behind him, he asked how their conference with Felicia Giordano had gone. He listened intently, watching how they reacted as they relayed their experience in dealing with Felicia. John could see that these two agents were serious about their jobs, and that they also understood the limitations that were being placed upon them. "Sir, if I could persuade Ms. Giordano to volunteer as my sparring partner in the ring, it would really make my day," Sheila remarked to her captain, bringing a smile to both Connolly and Williams. "I would like to invite you two to a barbecue Stephanie and I are throwing this coming weekend," the captain said suddenly. "I can invite the entire task force, however. Unfortunately, the Hampton estate is being painted. So please keep this between us." He smiled, as did they. Sure, sir," responded Sheila. "Yes, sir, it would be my pleasure," Sam said. John and Stephanie Connolly and their three children, John, Julie, and Ingrid, ages 12, 9, and 7 respectively, lived in a 3-bedroom Cape Cod house located in Levittown, Long Island. Stephanie grew up in this home, which was left to her by her parents when they retired to Florida some years back. It was a beautiful and comfortable May day when Sam, his wife, Erin, and their two teenage daughters, Tammy and Lenita, arrived at the Connolly home around 1 p.m. The kids disappeared almost immediately into the backyard, or to the game room where there was a pool table and a ping-pong table, the latest video games, and 2 televisions. Sheila arrived alone around 1:30 p.m., bringing a home-baked cherry pie and a bottle of red wine. Both John and Sam greeted her when she arrived. There were several other people at the barbecue, and the mixer was quite comfortable. A couple of neighbors and a few more friends arrived a few minutes later. In all, there were about 25 people. At 4:30 p.m., after everyone had stuffed themselves with hot dogs, hamburgers, and sausages, they retired into different parts of the house. The ladies congregated in the dining room, while the men moved into the living room. There were outbursts of laughter as stories of life's experiences were shared among friends. After a while, several people said their goodbyes. With only a few guests left, John invited Sheila and Sam up to his study, where he wanted to show them his gun collection. The remaining guests were having coffee with Stephanie in the dining room. After closing the door behind him, John asked them both to sit down. What I am about to tell you cannot leave this room. It is not, and I emphasize the word not, to be shared with the other agents or anyone else, he ordered. Both Sam and Sheila were taken by surprise. Yes, sir, they both responded. It seems as if we caught a very lucky break, though through unfortunate circumstances. What do you mean, sir? Asked Sheila. Do either of you know Assistant Leo Agostino? John asked. Them. I don't, responded Sheila. Yes, I do. I had a case with him back in, '82, which we lost, Sam answered. It was just before you came on board and took over the task force. Yes, the case against Leo Russo, one of Giordano's lieutenants, added John. We went in there with guns blaring. We had tapes and photos of an exchange between Russo and one of his dealers. This was the break we were looking for. Man, if we could have gotten Russo, it would have been just a matter of time before we would have gotten the rest of the Giordano family. Sam, now standing, continued, then things started to go wrong, just before we went into trial. First, the photos and tapes disappeared. Then surprise witnesses came forward as alibis to Leo's whereabouts when the exchange had taken place. We tried to get a hold of the witnesses, but then they disappeared. Mr. Agostino pleaded with the judge, Judge Sam Livingston, but it was no use. The lawyer for the defense, Mike Angelino, was good. One of the mob's top lawyers out of Chicago, if I remember right. The case was thrown out due to lack of evidence. Man, was I mad. Well, said John, the other day, I had a visitor. It was Mr. Agostino. It seems like one of the undercover officers who was executed was a relative of none other than Mike Angelino. What, the defense lawyer? Sheila asked. Yep, big ass mistake for the Giordano family, added John. But he's their lawyer. He can, testify against them, can he, asked Sam. No, he can, But what is interesting is that he did provide us with the name of someone who is not protected by attorney-client privilege. Judge Samuel Livingston, announced John. The judge who presided over the Russo case, asked Sam. Yes, none other, responded John. He is on the take. Sheila asked. Yep, Agent Ed White and I have been secretly working on gathering the evidence that would put him away, John said. A couple of days ago, we visited him at his home and had a long conversation. It seems as if the judge is in fear of his life and that of his family, and wants protection, so we struck up a deal. His family has been relocated to an undisclosed location. The judge will join them after he testifies against the Giordano family. Wow, that is a break, Sheila remarked. Last night the judge's house was bombed, said John. Oh my God, commented Sheila. How did they know, asked Sam. I don't know. Obviously someone in the bureau, responded John. There was silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Captain, what do you need us to do, asked Sam. You are both going to disappear for a few weeks. I need you both to go home and pack your things. Sheila, At 1:00. Pick up Sam at his house, go to the location I have written down on this paper, and relieve the two gentlemen who are babysitting. The judge. Make sure you Aaron, T followed. Handing Sheila the paper and a bag, John continued, here is an electronic scanner. Scan your car before leaving your house, and then again after you pick Sam up. Under no circumstances are you to call anyone, family or otherwise. One more thing, you will be working with two others in protecting the judge. You are to take your orders from them. Is that understood? He asked them both. Yes, sir, we understand, both nodded. Tyler's return. June 6, 1984, New York City. Tyler Santiago stood staring up at the third-floor window, where he had lived with his mother so long ago. His deep blue eyes moistened as he thought back to the last time he was here. His heart began to pound harder as he once more visualized his mother's ruthless murder. With strong hands that trembled, his lean, strong body almost buckled as he relived the scene. Never knowing his father, his mother was his only source of love and strength. Raised by his uncle, who took him in after his mother died, Tyler learned quickly to adapt. His uncle George, a police officer, was very kind and had opened his home and heart to him. Shortly after taking him in, his uncle took him upstate to an open field, where he made a makeshift dummy, gave Tyler his gun, and ordered him to empty the chamber at the dummy. At first, Tyler hesitated, looking at his uncle, shouting that this would not bring back his mother. Yeah, you, rewrite, but you can, kill the bastards that killed her. Shoot the damn dummy, his uncle ordered. Tyler, with tears in his eyes, shot at the dummy. Every time he ran out of bullets, his uncle would take the gun, reload it, and give it back to him. After a short time, Tyler was reloading the gun by himself and putting holes all over the dummy. This went on for almost 2 hours. When the bullets finally ran out, his uncle took him in his arms, and they both cried openly. His uncle loved Tyler's mother. He looked into Tyler's eyes and asked his forgiveness for not finding who did this and apologized for not protecting them. Tyler realized that his uncle felt that it had been his fault and that he should have prevented it somehow. Tyler, he remarked, we need to go on. Your mother will always be in your heart, and you must never dishonor her memory by taking out any revenge, or seeking to hurt others for what has happened. Tyler watched his uncle as tears ran down his eyes. Tyler realized in that instant that this man was hurting as much as he was, and that he too lost someone dear to him. They forgave each other and moved on. From that day forward, they never spoke of it again. Tyler was far wiser because of this man. He became the son his uncle never had. He excelled in school and became a student, continuing to excel all the way through high school, and then later on in the police academy. He remembered when he graduated from high school, both his aunt and uncle took him out to a nice dinner. Over the years, they became very close, their love was very strong. When his uncle kidded him about finally earning his keep, Tyler smiled back and stated, see, Mon can, you take care of me for a few years more. What you mean, boy, his uncle barked at him. Well, how am I going to enroll in the police academy if I don't have someone to take care of me? Tyler responded. His uncle stared at his nephew, tears swelling up in his eyes. What are you saying? He asked. I have been accepted and will attend the police academy. Just call me Rookie. Then he smiled. His uncle could not contain himself and started to cry. Then, gathering some composure, he rose from his chair, excused himself, and walked to the men's room. His aunt, with tears in her eyes, placed a warm hand on her nephew's cheek. "Oh, Tyler. Are you sure?" "Yes, Mom," he said. When George returned, Tyler commented, "Dad, you remaking a spectacle of yourself." His uncle sat back down and looked up at him. "I hope you are not doing this for me. You know I don't want you to do something you may later regret. You know," his uncle went on, "we are very proud of you, and we don't want you to waste your life walking the beat and putting your life on the line." "Dad, I don't plan to walk the beat. I plan to be the best damn detective you ever saw. My goal is to be your boss so I can fire your butt," Tyler responded. They both stared at each other and started to laugh out loud. His aunt quickly shushed them, ordering them to behave. They both stared at each other. Their love was unquestionable, and Tyler called him Dad. "Hey, Tyler, snap out of it," his partner, Eric, shouted. Tyler was now a detective with the 25th Precinct out of Upper Manhattan. Though Eric and Tyler had been partners for over a year, Eric knew very little about him. "What's going on?" Eric asked. Nothing," responded Tyler. They had been called to investigate a shooting on 120th and St. Nicholas. The neighborhood had not changed as much as Tyler thought it would. Crime had gone up, but for some reason, this area remained almost untouched by the increase. This was the first time they were called to his old neighborhood since his assignment to this precinct. There were several police cars already on the scene cornering off the area. Tyler walked over while Eric was getting the details from the first officer on the scene. A young black man was face down in a pool of blood. It appeared he had been gunned down as he ran from his assailant. There were 2 gunshot wounds in his back. A bag of groceries lay scattered on the ground just ahead of the victim. Tyler examined the position of the body and the surrounding area. The victim was not wearing colors, scarf, belt, or jacket, which would indicate whether or not he belonged to a local gang. Eric joined Tyler after a while. Vic's name is Jimmy Johnson Jr., lives over at 222 St. Nicholas. Someone said they think the Spades, a local gang, did the shooting. But they aren't sure, Eric said. Tyler stared at Eric for a few seconds. "Did you say Jimmy Johnson Jr.?" Tyler asked. Yes. "Why? You know him?" asked Eric. "Maybe." Tyler, who had been squatting over the body, got up and started for 222 St. Nicholas, followed by Eric. As he stood in front of the building, the memory of his painful past resurfaced. They used to hang out on the stoop. He, Charlie, Jimmy, Davy, and a few other friends whose names he no longer remembered. He walked up the stairs and rang the Johnson bell to gain entry into the building. "Hello, who's there?" someone asked. Though the intercom. It's the police. "I'd like to talk to you, Tyler," said. The bell on the door rang, and they were let in. While Tyler and Eric climbed the 2 stories to apartment 2A. Tyler felt a sickening feeling inside. He had been here before. A long time ago. The door was opened, and they stepped into a neat apartment. Mrs. Johnson was sitting in the living room to their left. And they approached her. "Ma, I am Detective Santiago and this is Detective Thomas. Do you have a son named Jimmy Johnson?" Tyler asked. "Yes, is something wrong?" she inquired. Tyler approached Mrs. Johnson and sat in a chair beside her. "I am so sorry, Ma, but your son was shot and killed," Eric said. There was silence. Mrs. Johnson sat there staring at them. Then said, "My son died over 10 years ago, young man." "That was my grandson," she responded. "Why, he was a good boy, never got into trouble, was doing real good in school." "Why?" Tyler looked at her and knew what she was going through. He knelt down facing her. "I am so sorry," he said. She looked into his eyes, staring, and then reached out for him. "Oh my God, Tyler, it's you. Oh my God, I know how hard. This is for you," she said. They both embraced each other and remained that way for a few minutes. Eric did not know what was going on, but stepped out into the hallway. "Leave it alone," he thought to himself. When he heard Tyler begin to question Mrs. Johnson, he went in and found him still kneeling in front of her, the tears in his eyes had dried up. Eric did not interfere. He simply waited until Tyler was through with the questioning. When Tyler got up, he grasped her hands and gave her a kiss on her cheek. "You are in my prayers," he said to her. "And you in mine," she responded. Tyler and Eric took their leave. A few minutes later, they were walking toward their car. Tyler informed the paramedics, who were now loading the body into their ambulance, to advise the coroner that he would be helping with the arrangements on behalf of the family and gave them his card. "Give me the keys," Tyler told Eric with an outstretched hand, indicating that he toss him the keys. Eric complied and jumped into the passenger's side, just in time before Tyler gunned it. The car peeled out, heading uptown toward 127th and St. Nicholas, Spade's territory. Eric sat quietly in the car, wishing he could say something to defuse the situation. But he had seen Tyler before in this state. There was no talking to him. Just got to make sure nothing goes wrong, Eric thought to himself. A few seconds later, they were cruising up St. Nicholas. Then Tyler saw what he was looking for. On a park bench, up against a stone wall running alongside St. Nicholas Park, he saw a group of black teenagers. All were wearing a black scarf, some with spades tattooed on their arms. Tyler pulled over and stepped calmly out of the car. With Eric behind him, they approached the 6 teenagers at the bench. 3 of the teenagers stood up and came forward as Tyler and Eric approached. Tyler pulled out his revolver and aimed it at the head of one of the approaching teenagers. They all froze. Tyler continued to walk forward, past the 3 that stood up to greet them. In the meantime, Eric pulled his weapon out, and though he kept it in check, he meant to use it if any of these punks tried anything. Sitting on the bench was Lamont Spaling, leader of the Black Spades. "What you want, man?" asked Lamont of Tyler. "I want you, you asshole," Tyler responded while bringing the gun barrel up to his face. "Hey, you crazy, man," Lamont said alarmingly. "What, why you say that, man?" Lamont asked, obviously shaken. 'Cause you killed my friend, kid over on 120th, Tyler responded. Man, I don't know what you are talking about. That wasn't us. I swear, man, Lamont cried out. Well, I am going to find out who did it, and if I hear you, or any one of your whores here were in on it, I am coming for you, Tyler finished. Tyler stepped back slowly, then turned his back on them and walked away. Eric followed, walking backward with his weapon still out, cautiously watching to see if any one of them made any sudden moves. As they drove back to the precinct, Eric asked Tyler if he was all right, if there was anything he needed to talk about. Tyler told Eric it was something from the past and that he would rather not talk about it right now. Eric nodded and they drove silently the rest of the way. The assignment. June 6, 1984, New York City. When Eric and Tyler returned to their precinct, they were advised that Captain O'Malley wanted to see them. Captain John O'Malley had been at this precinct for more than 22 years and had known Tyler's uncle well. Tyler's uncle died in a gun shooting a few years before Tyler had transferred to Manhattan. At the time, O'Malley had promised himself that if Tyler ever managed to transfer over to his precinct, he would watch over him, and he'd been true to his word. Eric and Tyler reporting as requested. Oh great leader, Eric announced. Cut the bullshit, Eric, commanded O'Malley. Sorry, sir, responded Eric. Tyler smiled and grabbed a seat in front of O'Malley's desk. Eric followed suit and sat without any more comments. Got a job for you, right up your alley. We got an official turnstile, who needs protection from the mob. We're looking for volunteers to keep an eye on him around the clock. We took a vote while you two were out, and it was unanimous that you take on the assignment, O'Malley announced. But, Captain, we got ourselves an assignment already. That kid that was gunned down was probably an innocent bystander, Tyler responded. Also, sir, I knew his father and know the family. I owe it to them. The captain stared at Tyler and then over to Eric. He knew it was a mistake to have sent him over there, to his old neighborhood. It must have been hard for him. It's for that reason I am taking you off this case, too. Personal, O'Malley said. Sorry, Tyler, but I really need you guys on this one. Rumor is that a professional hitman has been hired to take this guy out. It is believed that he is already in town. I am giving you full authorization to do what is necessary to keep this guy alive. I don't care if you take him home with you, or if you move to another state, just as long as you have him in the Manhattan courthouse at 8:00 Monday morning, the 6th of August, to testify against the Giordano family. Why us? Asked Eric. Why not the feds? 'Cause they believe there is an informant in the FBI, which they haven't been able to flush out, with ties to the Giordano family. Your assignment is sitting somewhere safe, for now, and we need you to pick him up and disappear for a few weeks. Simple as that, O'Malley concluded. Where exactly is he? Asked Eric. Before I tell you where your assignment is, I need you to let your loved ones know that you'll be out of touch for several weeks. Be back here tomorrow morning bright and early, responded O'Malley. Tyler had no one to call. His aunt now lived in a nursing home. He would check in on her every once in a while. Things weren't The same after Uncle George was killed in a street shootout. Tyler was there when it happened, just like he was there when his mother was gunned down. This time, though, the killer did not get away. Tyler was by his uncle's side in an alley, with his head in Tyler's arms. As his uncle said his last words, Tyler heard click, click. It was the assailant in the darkness, lying between a garbage bin and a tenement wall. He was aiming a pistol at Tyler. Pulling the trigger, it was empty. Tyler had reached for his uncle's gun and, with uncontrollable rage, fired 2 shots into the assailant, and then replaced the gun in his uncle's hand. Tyler again felt the emptiness and loss of love. He held his uncle's lifeless body with tears streaming down his face. They fell silently, caressing the only father he ever knew. He felt no remorse for the life he took. He would leave it in the alley to be absorbed by hell. A quick investigation proved that Officer George Santiago died in the line of duty, killing his assailant before taking his last breath. His uncle was awarded for heroism and died a hero. Shortly after that, Tyler passed his detective test and was reassigned to the Manhattan precinct. The loss of his uncle had changed him. He now approached his job with fearless intent and defiance. He could be challenged, but never intimidated. His job was now his life, and the streets of Manhattan his home. Eric called his sister, Lucille, and asked her to take Fudge, his chocolate lab, for a few weeks. "Are you out of your mind?" Lucille responded. "Come on, it's only for a little while. I got a special assignment, and I can get out of it. Anyway, your kids love Fudge," Eric pleaded, knowing Lucille would relent. "She always did." "Oh, okay. And you are right. The kids do love Fudge. But you owe me, big time," said Lucille. "Eric, please be careful." "I will, little sis, promise," he responded. Having put their affairs in order, Tyler and Eric returned to O'Malley's office. The captain wrote down the address and handed it over to them without saying a word, just in case someone was listening. "Don't trust anyone," O'Malley said. Both Tyler and Eric got up, staring at their captain, and nodded. "Captain, I need a favor before disappearing." "What is it, Tyler?" he asked. "The victim of this morning's shooting. I promised to help out with the arrangements and funeral cost," Tyler said. "No problem, Tyler, I'll handle it and will advise the family accordingly. You can see them after you redone," the captain promised. "Tyler, I'll get the punks who shot this kid. I promise." "Thanks again, Captain," Tyler responded. Missing in action. May 28, 1984, Giordano Estate, New Jersey. Fabio Giordano met with his lieutenants on a weekly basis. During these meetings they discussed various topics, such as any significant changes that may be of interest to the family. One of the items brought up this week was the arrest of several soldiers on gambling charges. For this meeting, Felicia chose not to physically attend. Instead, she decided she would only monitor it from her study via closed-circuit TV. This was one of many steps she had taken to distance herself from the day-to-day responsibilities of running the organization, giving Fabio more control. Fabio informed John DeLuca that the family lawyer would be representing them, and that if things got really bad, they would arrange for the case to be brought before one of the judges they Had on the payroll. Well, as you know, Mr. Giordano, we are down to only one since Judge Livingston is on vacation, DeLuca replied. Fabio stared at John DeLuca for only a second and went on. Well, let's see how things go. Make sure you keep me informed. Yes, sir, responded DeLuca. After discussing several other items, the meeting was adjourned and Fabio quickly returned to Felicia's study. Felicia, has the judge ever taken time off without letting us know first? Is this normal? He asked his sister. Actually, I was wondering the same thing. I don't recall it ever happening before, she finished. Felicia was very proud of her brother. He was quick and did not take anything for granted. Without any hesitation, Fabio left the room and began to make some calls. Within an hour, Fabio was back in Felicia's office. Sis, I think we have a problem. In fact, I am sure we have a problem, Fabio said. Felicia listened intently to what Fabio had to say. It seems as if the judge went on vacation quite suddenly. Actually, no one knows where he went. Attempts to contact him via his beeper went unanswered. Lastly, they went on vacation before the youngest kid, who attends NYU, finished her semester. What about their son, the one who worked at a local hardware store? Asked Felicia. I didn't check on him since he didn't live with the judge. But I'll find out, Fabio told her as he left her study. Felicia sat there quietly thinking the matter over, waiting for Fabio's answer to her question. An hour and a half later, Fabio returned. It seems as if the judge's son quit his job suddenly and was gone. Something about having to go on vacation with his family is what his boss said, Fabio told Felicia. The two discussed the matter in great length, trying to come up with a good reason why the judge would suddenly leave on vacation. They mulled over the possibility of a death in the family, which would explain the sudden departure. However, why wouldn't they have advised anyone about it? Why doesn't anyone know where they went? After all was said and done, the only possible conclusion was that the judge had been compromised and had gone underground, probably being protected somewhere by the FBI. Fabio, get a hold of the rest of the lieutenants. We need to have an emergency meeting right away, Felicia ordered. Within a few hours, all the lieutenants were assembled, 8 men and 2 women. Their responsibilities included all aspects of overseeing the prostitution, gambling, extortion, investments, and real estate operations. These lieutenants were the best in their fields and were handsomely compensated for their expertise. Today they had more than 700 soldiers in their employ. In addition, the family was successful in infiltrating select government agencies, forming liaisons with individuals who had a price. These contacts were well rewarded for keeping the family informed of any changes or situations that might affect the well-being of their organization. Nothing was left to chance. Though Fabio headed the meeting, it was Felicia's attendance that gave urgency to the matter. It seems as if Judge Livingston has been compromised, Fabio announced. We have failed in every attempt to reach him. Our lawyer, Mike Angelino, was unable to provide us with any information on the whereabouts of the judge, though he feels there is nothing to worry about, Fabio concluded. There was silence in the room as each took in what was being said. Felicia stared across the room at their faces as if she was trying to read their minds. After a few minutes, Adriana Romano, daughter of Aaron Romano, spoke up. Could our attorney also be compromised? She asked. Both Fabio and Felicia smiled. We think so, Fabio said. Again silence. From their faces, Felicia could see that they all understood the gravity of the situation and what needed to be done. We need to know where the judge is as soon as possible. Simple as that. I don't fucking care if you have to break arms and legs to get the information. Spare no expense. Am I making myself clear to all of you? Asked Fabio. Felicia stood up and walked to Fabio's side. No matter what you hear, even if you think it isn't worth anything, let us know. We will decide if it's important or not. Getting us this information is your top priority. Do we all understand? Felicia asked as she met everyone's eyes. Yes. Yes, we understand, was the overall response. With that said, the meeting was adjourned. Leo, hold up, Fabio said. Leo, we need you to warn Mike. Angelino. It is my understanding that there are accidents occurring in New York City traffic all the time. Please make sure that he is okay. Leo nodded and understood. I'll take care of it. Felicia sat down on one of the chairs closest to Fabio. I need to make a call, she said to him. Staring at his sister, he nodded. Yes, you need to make a call, he answered. When two is better than one. May 29, 1984, San Francisco. There was a cool breeze coming off San Francisco Bay as Shannon Murphy and her daughter, Jamie, walked on the beach, heading in a southwest direction. They shared fond moments of the last 20 years with each other. Jamie, now 22, had just returned from attending Harvard Business School. Her mother had been diagnosed with cancer, and Jamie returned to help her through these trying times. It's not serious, Jamie. So don't start making plans to sell my house or trade in my collectibles, she told her daughter. Laughing. Mom, stop it. Don't say those things. Anyway, there is no money in your worthless collectibles, and as far as the house is concerned, I have two buyers standing by. Believe me, I checked before coming out, she responded. Shannon stared at her daughter, and then they both burst out laughing as Jamie gave her mother a hug. Mom, you are going to outlive us all, or I will be very upset with you, Jamie added. As they walked along the beach, a strange feeling came over Shannon as she stared at a stranger now fast approaching them. He looked so familiar, and yet she knew she didn't know him. As he came closer, their eyes met, and she felt a chill run down her spine. It was a déjà vu moment. She stared after him and so did Jamie. What's the matter, Mom? Asked Jamie. I don't know. I think I know that man, she responded. Nick continued his jogging for another 2 miles, ending up at the Golden Gate Bridge Southeast parking lot where he jumped into a Jeep Cherokee and drove to his oceanside home in Daly City. In the last 20 years, Nick had traveled out of the country 12 times. All of his ventures had proven successful. As a result, he had earned quite a reputation, and could now be selective in the jobs he took on. Along with his success, however, came a deepening concern that over the years he might have slipped up somewhere along the lines, and that someone might be closing in on him. Nick would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night to Sneak a peek out his window to assure himself no one was watching. Once in a while, he would get up and actually go out jogging simply to make sure there were no cars in the neighborhood that didn't belong there. He made it a point to know everyone who lived within a half-mile radius of his house. And his photographic memory made this task a lot easier. Nick never turned down an invitation to a barbecue or neighborhood gathering, as it was his way of meeting his neighbors, though he himself had never hosted a party at his own house. He seldom engaged in any lengthy conversations and abruptly interrupted most by excusing himself to get some punch, or to use the restroom. Nick had an uncanny ability to size people up by what he saw in their eyes and in the mannerisms they expressed upon meeting him. People, on the other hand, felt uneasy around Nick. Though he was a handsome man, no one ever saw him smile, and his eyes could bring a chill to the warmest of people. Rumor was that he had lost his wife and children in an accident, and that he was drained of all emotion. Well, that was the rumor anyway. However, no one knew who started it. After showering, Nick sat in front of the TV and made his morning calls. Over the years, all of the numbers had been changed. San Francisco was dropped from his list as it was too close to home. He now had numbers in New York, Chicago, Florida, Los Angeles, D.C., as well as numbers in England, Sicily, and Italy. Though he had bank accounts in most of these locations, they were all under different names. ATMs made it easy for Nick to draw from anywhere in the United States or abroad. Additionally, Nick always disguised himself before using any ATM, never used the same machine twice in a row, and always used them at odd times when very few people were on the streets. When he finished checking all of the numbers, he was surprised to see that there were 2 US numbers that were disconnected, one in Chicago and the other New York. Must be a sale going on, he thought to himself, laughing. Within 15 minutes, he was on his way to Middletown, California, approximately 94 miles from Daly City. He had called ahead to the Twin Pine Casino and Hotel for available rooms. Upon checking into the hotel, he went straight up to his room, made 2 calls, and left the room within half an hour. The calls, which would automatically be charged to his room, afforded him the luxury of not having to physically check out. The next day, 2 hours later, he was back home planning his trip to Chicago and New York. As usual, he called David Spencer, letting him know he would be out of town. Before leaving, he checked through the apartment, ensuring a pristine atmosphere awaited his return. A blast from the past. June 12, 1984, Chicago. As downtown Chicago officers Gerard Simpson and David Cassidy were finishing up their 2 to midnight shifts, getting ready to return to the 21st Precinct, a call of a possible break-in on East 16th Street at South Michigan Avenue came over the police radio. Just a few minutes away, they took the call and rushed to the scene, shutting off their sirens a few blocks away. As they quietly cruised down the street, they noticed a blue van parked near the back entrance of one of the warehouses that lined South Michigan. Both officers had more than 8 years of experience, having been together for 6 of them. This experience paid off as they continued on South Michigan as if they hadn't noticed the blue van. Once out of sight, they radioed in for backup, advising all units to come in quietly. Within 20 minutes, police officers were situated on both ends of 16th Street along South Michigan and South Indiana Avenues. To catch the occupant by surprise, they had a plainclothes officer walk up 16th Street pretending to be drunk and approach the van from the back, while a male and a female undercover officer drove in an unmarked car toward the van from the front. As soon as the car went past the front of the van, the drunk reached the driver's side window, distracting the occupant long enough for the female officer to jump out of the car and approach from the passenger's side with her gun drawn. "Freeze," was all the driver heard. Within minutes, both the driver and the van were quickly removed from the scene. Quietly, most of the cruisers were positioned toward the entrance of the warehouse while the rest covered the back. 20 minutes had passed when, finally, 4 suspects carrying boxes walked out into an armada of police officers. "Get your hands up," echoed a police mic. The 4th man drew a gun and fired, grazing one of the police officers, which resulted in a barrage of returned gunfire. Another of the suspect's quick thinking saved his life, as he hit the ground immediately when the gunfire started, shouting, "I give up, I give up." 2 of the individuals died as a result of the return fire, while the other 2 faced grand larceny, resisting arrest, carrying a concealed weapon, and firing at police. With each facing over 20 years to life in prison, one of the suspects asked to speak to whoever was in charge, claiming he had something to trade for a lighter sentence. Captain Armando Chavez stood 5'7" and weighed around 175 pounds. He had 18 years experience as the captain of this precinct and, as a result, had little patience for what he referred to as street garbage. "Okay, asshole, you better have something good, or I am going to make sure you never see the light of day for wasting my time. Do you understand?" he asked the suspect. "Man, why you got to be like that? I ain't hurt no one. You got no cause." The suspect went on. "Okay, we are done here," the captain responded as he got up to leave. "Oh. Okay, okay. I know who killed the Black Aces," the suspect blurted out. "What? Who the fuck are the Black Aces? They some gang or something, and why should I give a shit about them?" the captain responded, looking at the other detective in the room to see if anyone knew what he was talking about. All shrugged their shoulders. No one knew what he was talking about. My name is Kenny Roberts. I used to be known as Lefty, and I was a member of the Black Aces out of New York," he blurted out. He could see in their faces that no one knew what he was talking about. "Some guy drove us to New Jersey in a van, shot up the van, and then dumped us into the Hudson River," he went on. I was lucky. I managed not to get shot and swim out. But the other guys didn't make it. This fucking guy, he set us up. Told us he was sent by the Costalino family to save us from doing time for shooting some bitch related to a cop. He killed Blackie. And then tried to kill us by shooting up the van," Lefty finished. There was silence in the room as everyone stared at Lefty with new interest. A gruesome discovery. June 13, 1984. Captain O'Malley sat frozen as Captain Chavez recounted what he had been told by Lefty. It was a good 15 minutes before O'Malley was able to compose himself and start barking orders to his men. "I need 2 volunteers to go to Chicago and bring back a big piece of garbage," he shouted out. Next he called Agent John Connolly, advising him about the incidents that happened over 20 years ago involving the Castellino family. What Captain O'Malley did not remember was that the woman who had been killed by the drive-by was the mother of Tyler Santiago. His attention was on the fact that they were going to find some bodies off the shore of New Jersey and perhaps solve the mystery of what happened to the Black Aces. Within the hour, after receiving a call from Chicago, Connolly and O'Malley were sharing a ride to New Jersey. They were met with scores of police officers and agents from the Bureau. There were already several divers in the water combing the Hudson River close to where they suspected the van would be. The divers moved cautiously through the murky water as they went deeper and deeper. Moving slowly, they found shoes, hubcaps, and other obstacles dumped over the years. All of a sudden, one of the divers spotted something big in the water. Pointing, he directed the other divers to the location. They all swam toward what appeared to be a vehicle. It was the van. One of the divers peered into a window, discovering the skeletal remains of one unlucky punk. Ditto for the back of the van where the cargo contained remnants of a death scene and just punishment for the innocent life of a young mother. This was their tomb, he thought to himself. Attaching a buoy to the van with a line attached to a balloon, they released the balloon, allowing it to flow to the surface, marking the van's location. A crane was brought in to hoist it ashore. Once on shore, they approached it with caution, as if the victims would jump out and gouge everyone. Upon opening the back of the van, several officers puked at the smell and sight of the cadavers. The mangled remains were protruding from the back of the van with outstretched hands, pleading to be saved. The site was sealed off as scores of curious onlookers and forensic investigators from both the FBI and New Jersey crime labs ascended the area. The initial report released a few days later indicated that there were 17 bodies in all. There was a body in the front seat, which appeared to have a gunshot to the head. 8 died due to drowning while the rest from gunshot wounds. Except for the passenger in the front seat, the rest were piled up against the back of the van. Lefty had been brought to New York to be questioned by both the FBI and the local police. During questioning, O'Malley remembered that it was Tyler's mom who had been killed by the Black Aces. He wanted to rush to the phone and call Tyler, but then realized that there was no way to contact him at this time. It would not have been a good idea as it might jeopardize the safety of his men and the success of the mission. Of interest was that the bullet extracted from the passenger in the front seat was fired from the same gun that killed the only witness to the drive-by shooting some 20 years ago. Further, was that the witness known as Uncle Ted was really Theodore Enzinola, and the gentleman killed at the scene, known as Fat Man, turned out to be Joseph Bolano. Both were members of an old crime syndicate from Chicago known as the Giovanna family. Rumor was that there was a contract on both of these men, and that it had been carried out. So what the hell were these two doing in the middle of Manhattan on that day? Did the Castellino family contract the Black Aces to make a hit on them? These questions tugged at both Captain O'Malley and Agent Connolly. Agent Connolly immediately ordered 4 of his men to open up all the files on these cases and begin an investigation on all ties to any of the crime families, past or present, and any other information they could dig up. Felicia gets a call. May 29, 1984. Around 4 p.m. a call from Nick Costello was received. The instructions were, as always, simple. Go to your bedroom, and under the nightstand on the left side of the bed, you will find an envelope with instructions, directed Nick and immediately hung up. Felicia almost immediately became upset. How in the world did he get this into the house without our knowing? The motherfucker scares me, she thought, clenching her fists. Fabio, come here, she shouted. Fabio ran up the stairs, extracting his shoulder gun, thinking his sister was in danger. What's the matter, he shouted back as he burst into her room. Look where that fucking Nick Costello left the envelope with the instructions, she said, pointing to the nightstand, which had now been moved, exposing the manila envelope. So what? You are making too much of this, Fabio responded. Don, you understand? He was in our house. He placed the envelope under this nightstand. Doesn't that bother you, she shouted back at him. I guess it does, but what do you want me to do about it, he fired back at her. What can we do? I guess there is nothing we can do. Not now, she answered. Felicia stared after Fabio as he exited the room, then at the envelope. She bent down and retrieved the envelope, then sat on the bed. The instructions gave locations on where to leave the information. In this particular case, she would have to actually put the judge's name in full with the additional information that he had gone undercover. They could not allow the dirty judge to discover he had a conscience, one that the Costellino family owned and intended to keep. For over 20 years, Felicia was in control. She had always been on top of any situation, seeing it through to its solution. But Nick scared her. She didn't own him, and this scared her more than anything else. She sat there and began to understand that the price of keeping the family together would be to relinquish control to someone she did not trust. Even the split-second control could cost too much. She needed Nick, and this made her physically ill. Fabio stopped at the bottom of the stairs after leaving Felicia's room. He too was worried about Nick Costello, worried that someday the assassin might come after them. But he also knew that for now there wasn't too much he could do. When the time came, he would sit down with his sister and develop a plan to eliminate Nick Costello in protective custody. June 7, 1984. At 7 p.m., Tyler stopped by his apartment, stuffed some clothes into a duffel bag, then drove to pick up Eric in Queens. Eric said goodbye to his dog, Fudge, and gave his sister a hug of love and reassurance. Fudge ran over to Tyler, who played with him for a bit. Tyler then kissed Lucille on the forehead. She relaxed, knowing Tyler would always be at Eric's back. You take care of him, Tyler, shouted Lucille as they both waved goodbye to her. You can count on it, little sister, responded Tyler. Tyler now headed back into Manhattan by way of the Triborough Bridge. Driving across 125th Street and turning left on Claremont Avenue heading south, Tyler went 2 blocks past his intended destination, turned right, and parked in a 1-hour standing zone. Both he and Eric then walked to the back entrance of Riverside Church. As they entered the church, they found a few people scattered about the pews. Tyler anointed himself with holy water, making the sign of the cross, and sat in one of the last pews. Eric, mimicking Tyler, did the same. However, he moved up to the front of the pews and sat down. After a few minutes, Eric saw the priest go into the confession box. Eric got up and went in. "Father, please forgive me for I have sinned," Eric said to the partition between him and the priest. "What sin have you committed, my son?" responded the priest. "I have taken the name of the Lord in vain," Eric said. There was a short silence as the priest hesitantly asked, "Why come to me with this sin?" "I was told you are the forgiver of all sins," Eric replied. With that said, the priest advised Eric to perform 7 Hail Marys from the upstairs balcony. He stepped out of the confessional box and walked up the aisle, kneeled and made the sign of the cross as he left the inner entrance to the church. Tyler watched him leave, looking around to see if anyone else was watching him. Tyler got up and, kneeling at the other end of the pew, made the sign of the cross before leaving through a side entrance. Eric walked up to the balcony area where there were 3 people sitting, an elderly white man, a white woman, and a black man. All 3 looked up at Eric as he approached. Both the woman and the black man reached inside of their jackets as Eric approached. "Easy does it," Eric said. "Keep them holstered," said Tyler as he approached from the other side behind them. "Jesus," said Sam as he realized he was caught off guard. "No, Tyler Santiago is the name." "I am Eric Thomas," Eric said, putting out his hand. "I am Samuel Williams, and this is my partner, Sheila Cooper." Sam responded, shaking Eric's hand. Sam and Sheila had been babysitting the judge now for almost 3 weeks, moving from safe house to safe house, not staying more than a couple of days. Both had severed all contact with friends and family, except for an occasional call to John Connolly to get updates. They had virtually disappeared. After all formalities were exchanged, Tyler suggested they wait until he got the car and honked before bringing the judge out. They all agreed. Tyler went out the front of the church heading south on Riverside Drive to where he parked his car. As he walked down the street, he noticed a black Toyota parked across the street, with the engine idling and 2 men in it. "What the fuck is going on?" he thought to himself. Not bringing any attention to himself, he continued his walk. Reaching the other end of the street, he turned right and, when he was out of sight, ran to his car. "Shit, what the fuck do I do?" he said to himself. Tyler pulled out, made a right at Riverside Drive, and pulled up to the space behind the car with the 2 men in it. Stepping quickly out of his car, he approached the driver whose window was down. "Excuse me," Tyler said. Yeah," the driver asked. "Can you tell me where Claremont Avenue is?" asked Tyler. "Yeah, it's about 1 block over," responded the driver. The man in the driver's seat looked about 6'1" with a bulky build, wearing a white shirt under a dark suit with no tie. The passenger looked about 5 feet and some inches, very thin built, wearing a black turtleneck sweater under a black jacket. The passenger had an overcoat sitting on his lap with hands tucked under it. Tyler reached into his jacket and pulled out his revolver and placed it against the driver's temple. "I want to see both your hands, right now," he ordered. Both men made their hands visible. "Hey, man, what the fuck is this?" the driver asked. "Why are you parked here?" asked Tyler. "We are waiting for our wives to come out of the church. They are members of the choir," the passenger said. "Let me see your license and registration," Tyler ordered. "Why? We haven't done anything," asked the driver. Without any warning, the passenger reached into his jacket and pulled out a gun and fired at Tyler, who was partially visible in the driver's window. It happened so fast, that Tyler fell backward on the pavement, avoiding getting shot in the face or chest. The driver put the car in drive and gunned the accelerator. The car jumped out of its parking spot, hitting the right tail light of a car parked a few feet in front of them. Tyler fired after them, hitting their backlight and trunk as the car screeched away. Out of the church came Sam with his pistol drawn. Not moving too far from the entryway, he shouted out to Tyler, "You all right?" "Yeah, I am okay," Tyler responded. Tyler jumped into his car and drove it up on the sidewalk in front of the church. "Let's get the hell out of here," he shouted to Sam. Sam ran back into the church to retrieve the others. In a matter of seconds, they all piled into the car, made a quick U-turn and headed south toward 95th Street where they entered the Henry Hudson Parkway heading north. Less than a block away, a hot dog vendor witnessed the events that unfolded in the last few minutes. First stop, June 1, 1984, O'Hare Airport. Nick Costello, now traveling as Neil Gallucci, a freelance reporter for several magazines, arrived at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. Over time, Nick had become accustomed to using various disguises. Bleaching his hair blonde, wearing a plaid suit, dark rimmed glasses, and walking with a cane to help offset a fictitious bad limp, helped him to feel more at ease as he traveled about. The dark glasses gave him the ability to look around without bringing any suspicion to him. Anytime he entered an area, such as an airport or airplane, he would look into each person's face and determine, at a glance, if they posed a threat, if they were what they seemed or not. He could mentally count the number of men, women, and children that were on the flight with him, and would listen to any conversations in his immediate area. He always picked a seat in the aisle at the back, so that he could monitor any and all events that occurred during a flight. He was quite knowledgeable on how the emergency doors opened and where they were located. He had mentally practiced an emergency escape countless times over the last 20 years and, fortunately, never had to use it. Unlike many of those in his business, Nick always assumed he would get caught and was always prepared to do what he had to do to avoid it. Exiting the plane, he managed to cling to a young lady who was carrying a child and several bags while pushing a stroller. He offered to push the stroller for her and help her to the baggage area. Please let me help you with your stroller and bags," Nick invited her. At first she hesitated. However, his demeanor and the fact he was limping made her feel at ease. "Oh, okay, thank you," she said. "My husband should be at the gate to meet us," she commented. "Of course, no problem," he responded while taking control of the stroller and one of her bags. They walked, single file, off the plane. As they exited the gate, Nick looked about and saw a man a few feet behind the crowd start to wave. "Is that your husband?" Nick inquired. Yes, that's him," she responded as she too started to wave. They walked toward the man. The woman, the child, and the man all embraced while Nick stood there holding the stroller. "This gentleman was kind enough to help me with the bags and stroller," she told her husband. "It was my pleasure," Nick responded. Her husband nodded and thanked Nick for his kindness, eager to embrace his child and his wife again. "You folks have a great day," Nick said as he walked away. "You too, sir," the husband responded with a big smile on his face. Nick walked toward the baggage claim area, and as he did he spotted at least 3 suspicious-looking characters at different locations. A couple were standing about as if they had all the time in the world, while the other was pretending to be busy glancing at a magazine in front of a gate with no departure date on it. None gave him a second look. They may not be looking for him, but they are definitely looking for someone, he thought. Nick decided 3 strikes and you out, so he made the decision to leave the airport and head to another location to pick up his instructions. Hailing a cab, he headed for the Marriott Hotel on Frontage Road in Burridge. Entering the hotel lobby, he turned right and walked over to a lounge area and seated himself. From this vantage point, he could see the front desk as well as anyone else who may be idly passing time in the lobby. The 2 clerks behind the desk were both busy with clients checking in or out. They appeared to be competent at their jobs as calls came in while they were handling customers. After a short time, Nick strolled over to the front desk, identified himself, and asked if there were any messages for him. "Yes, sir, Mr. Gallucci," responded the clerk as he handed Nick a manila envelope. "Will you be checking in now, sir?" asked the clerk. "No, not at this time," answered Nick. "Can you direct me to your dining area?" "Why yes, of course, sir. Go to your left, past the elevators, and the restaurant will be on your right," the clerk responded. Nick nodded and went in the direction of the restaurant. Reaching the restaurant, he walked in and exited through the other side, then hailed a cab. Nick made it a practice to know the layout of any location, making sure that there was more than one entrance or exit. Before exiting the cab, Nick switched his identity to Robert Edwards by replacing the Neil Gallucci driver's license and credit cards with that of his new identity. Neil's credit cards and driver's license were concealed in a pocket located on the inside bottom of his pants. Nick found this to be risky, but necessary, as he didn't want anyone to track the whereabouts of either of his pseudo-characters. Nick arrived at the Holiday Inn close to Midway Airport. He walked directly to the gift shop, which was located in the lobby opposite the front desk. Buying Lifesavers candy and a magazine, Nick scanned the area for anything out of the ordinary. After a short period, he felt comfortable, at least for the moment, and checked in. "Welcome to Chicago," the clerk behind the desk said. "Thank you," responded Nick, eyeing him and watching for anything that might be deemed suspicious. He then handed the clerk his credit card and showed him his driver's license. "You are booked for one night, Mr. Edwards. Please sign here," the clerk said while pointing to a sheet he placed in front of Nick. Nick signed, was handed a card access key to room 315, and was bid a good day. Once in his room, Nick opened the envelope and glanced at the information provided. Next, he tore up the paper into small pieces and flushed them down the toilet. The job was in New York, which made things a little easier. So after rechecking the room, making a mental imprint of how it had been left, he departed for Chicago's Midway International Airport, where he booked a flight to Long Island's MacArthur Airport. The hit was 2 individuals, Naba Nadroy and Isel Nadroy. After a short time, Nick was able to interpret the names to be Felicia and Fabio Giordano. This could prove to be an interesting if not amusing situation. A simultaneous hit on rival families. Only time would tell. Second stop. June 2, 1984, New Jersey. On his flight, Nick smiled to himself as he tried to anticipate the orders that Felicia would have for him. It would be amusing if the hit was on a top member of the Chicago family. How would he collect if he wiped out both of the clients? He smiled to himself as he pondered the situation. After a short period, he came up with a plan on how to collect from all parties. Upon his arrival to MacArthur Airport, he rented a car and drove to the Holiday Inn in Hauppauge, one of the drop-off points Felicia was instructed to use. He stepped out of his car and entered the lobby from a back entrance, which was left open during the day. Making his way toward the front desk, he stopped short when he noticed that a camera had been installed. He immediately turned around and walked out of the inn to his car and left the area. Damn, he said to himself. Driving west on the Long Island Expressway, he made his way toward Hicksville, where there was another drop-off point. 45 minutes later, he was on the corner of Newbridge Road and West Old Country Road, where there was a restaurant called the Breakfast House. He sat down and ordered a chicken salad with some lemonade. As he sat there, he did his usual and casual search of the premises. There were no cameras here, and he waited to see if anyone was just hanging around. He did spot a middle-aged man reading a newspaper who seemed to be waiting for someone. Nick watched this man through his dark sunglasses and decided he did not pose a threat. An hour later, he finished his lunch, paid, and left only to return 5 minutes later to use the restroom. Suddenly there was a huge explosion on the other side of the restaurant. People jumped from their seats, running toward the commotion. Using the explosion as a distraction, Nick entered the restroom. Only one occupant could use it at any given time, and the entrance was not in plain view of the customers or anyone else in the restaurant. Lastly, there was a wide enough window in the back from which to exit. Nick locked the door behind him, pulled the cover off the trash can. He picked up the plastic garbage bag and extracted the envelope at the bottom, replacing the bag and cover to its original state. He unlocked the door and exited the bathroom via the window, closing it behind him. He then quickly made his way to his car and left the area. Nick continued west and was in Newark, New Jersey, an hour and a half later. Turning in his car as Robert Edwards, he hailed a cab and checked into a nearby motor lodge as Neil Gallucci. Next, he called Jay Messina from a nearby phone booth. Nick had not contacted Jay since his last job in New York about 20 years ago and was anxious to see how his old buddy was doing. "I am sorry, but that number has been disconnected," was the recording Nick heard. He left and returned to the motor lodge. "Where are you, Jay?" Nick thought to himself. Though Nick made it a point to keep in contact with most of the people he worked with, on an annual basis, Jay was not among them. Jay and he went back many years, and Nick trusted him. Due to other assignments and priorities, Nick had not tried to communicate with Jay for over 20 years. Has it been that long? Damn, I dropped the ball on this one. Nick remembered he and Jay agreed on a plan in the event Jay was ever compromised. The plan was simple: Jay would disconnect one of 3 numbers. If the first number was disconnected, it was an indication that Jay needed to talk with him as soon as possible. If the second number was disconnected, it would mean that he was compromised but that Nick did not have to worry, he had successfully escaped. If the third number was disconnected, it would mean that they knew who Nick was and that he needed to take the appropriate action to disappear. Since Nick lived under an assumed name, this did not worry him. Nick called all 3 numbers from the local phone booth and was somewhat relieved while at the same time disappointed to know that the second number, but not the third, had been disconnected. Nick trusted only a handful people in his life. Jay was one of those people, and now he had gone underground. Nick knew he left the country and figured he would go to a warm climate, to places they had talked about when they were together in the service. Good luck to you, Jay, Nick thought. Nick was now forced to change his plans slightly. This made him uneasy. He would be exposing himself to contacts he had never used before, especially now when the hit was a corrupted judge being protected by federal agents. He thought back to other hits of the past, all had an element of risk. But this hit raised the stakes higher. Nick was becoming excited with the challenge and prospect of successfully completing his mission. Here one day, gone the other. October 1969. What Nick didn't know was that approximately 5 years after his last visit to New York City, the FBI got a tip about Jay Messina. They got word that Jay was operating a gun shop in the back of his little store. The FBI, as was standard procedure, decided to monitor Mr. Messina's activities before closing in. This proved to be a bad decision on their part because Jay was a very cautious man who had installed concealed cameras years ago to monitor the streets around his shop. Cameras he could monitor from his home 6 miles away and, thus, became aware of not only their surveillance, but that they had planted bugs in his shop. As usual, he went to work the next several days and acted as if nothing was wrong as he cleaned out his back room. Step by step, he dismantled all of the weapons in the hidden room, carrying them out in his attaché case, cleaned them thoroughly of any fingerprints, then discarded them in different locations. Rivers, garbage cans, etc., throughout the city. On his last day, he spread gasoline inside his secret room and nailed it shut, then planted explosives with a timer set for 5 a.m. Next, he closed his shop at the normal time, knowing full well that he was being watched, and drove home. The 5 a.m. explosion could be heard over half a mile away. By 5:10 a.m., FBI agents burst into Jay Messina's home only to find he was gone with over a 10-hour head start. Though his car was still in the driveway, they noticed that the motorcycle he never used was no longer there. An all-points bulletin went out for someone riding a Harley Davidson FXRT 1340 Sport Glide motorcycle. The authorities quickly moved to freeze his checking and savings accounts only to find that Jay had transferred over $25,000 to an offshore account the previous night. They also discovered that he had other accounts under a different name totaling over $50,000, which were depleted soon after his disappearance. The motorcycle was later found parked at the Baltimore Washington International Airport, over 100 miles away. No one using his name or fitting his description were ever found boarding any flights out of the country. Jay Messina simply disappeared. Agents, using forensics, were able to tie the murder weapon used to kill Balnaldo Castellino to Jay Messina's shop. An intense investigation of Jay Messina ensued. At first, they suspected him of committing the assassination, but were later disappointed to learn that he was placed at his shop when the shooting occurred. Next, they began to look into his military record to determine with whom he served and had formed friendships with during that time. They came up with 7 names whose profiles fit the person they were looking for. 5 were identified and cleared. The remaining 2, Nick Costello and Theo Gresco, were unaccounted for. Most interesting was that Nick Costello and Theo Gresco had become members of the Giovanna family, responsible for most of the major crimes in Chicago from 1955 through 1959, including numbers and prostitution rackets. In early 1959, Frank and Emilio Sabraggio were found shot in their family vacation home in Florida. 4 of their top lieutenants were also found dead 2 days later in their Chicago headquarters with over $180,000 missing from the safe. However, missing until the 1964 drive-by shooting of Sylvia Santiago were the 2 victims, Theodore Enzinola, also known as Uncle Ted, and Joseph Bolano, otherwise known as Fat Man. As for Nick Costello and Theo Gresco, they simply disappeared from the face of the earth.